Welcome to the night, and to NightSleepWhisper. Tonight, you aren't just listening to a story, you are becoming part of a legend. Our 50-chapter odyssey, The Secret of the Silver Moon, begins now. From the crushing depths of the abyss to the burning sands of the desert, every step of this long journey is designed to carry you closer to deep, tranquil peace. If you are ready, turn off the lights and lean back. Our story begins. Captain Marcus walked slowly along the shore. The morning was very quiet. The sun was low in the sky, and the light was soft and gold. He liked this time of day. The air was cool and it smelled like salt. Marcus was a strong man with a serious face and a dark beard. He had spent many years on the water. His hands were rough from pulling heavy ropes and holding the wooden wheel of a ship. He wore a long, blue coat and boots that were covered in dry sand. He was not looking for anything special. He just wanted to think about his future. His old ship was gone, and he needed a new reason to sail. He looked at the ground. The tide was going out, leaving many things behind. He saw some small shells and some green seaweed. Then, he saw something different. It was a bright object near a large black rock. Marcus walked toward the rock. He bent down and reached into the wet sand. He pulled out a glass bottle. The glass was a deep green color, and it was very thick. He rubbed the sand off the side of the bottle with his thumb. Inside, he could see a piece of paper. The paper was rolled up tightly. It looked very old and yellow. A heavy cork was pushed deep into the top of the bottle. Marcus sat down on the rock. He pulled at the cork with his strong fingers. It was stuck, but he did not stop. After a moment, the cork came out. The smell of old dust came from the bottle. Marcus carefully turned the bottle upside down. The paper slid out into his hand. He unrolled the paper slowly. He did not want to tear it. The paper felt like dry skin. At the top of the page, there was a drawing of a silver moon. It was beautiful and detailed. Below the moon, there was a map of a place Marcus did not know. There were drawings of mountains, a jungle, and a small cove. At the very bottom, there were a few words written in dark ink. The silver shines in the dark. Follow the light of the moon to find the heart of the island. Marcus felt a spark of excitement in his chest. He looked at the horizon. The ocean was wide and full of secrets. He knew this was not a normal letter. This was a message for a brave person. He stood up and put the paper inside his coat. He felt the weight of the bottle in his other hand. He turned away from the water and started walking back toward the town. He needed to find someone who knew about old maps. He thought about his friend John. John was an old sailor who lived near the docks. John saw many things in his life. Perhaps he could explain the drawing of the silver moon. Marcus walked faster. His quiet morning was over. A new adventure was starting. Marcus arrived at the docks. The port was a busy place. Men carried heavy boxes from large ships. The smell of wet wood and fish was everywhere. He walked past a group of sailors who were talking loudly. He did not stop to talk to them. He had a goal. He walked toward a small, leaning house at the end of the pier. This was the home of John. John was an old man now, but he was once a famous navigator. He knew the oceans better than anyone. Marcus reached the house and hit the wooden door 3 times with his fist. The sound of his hand on the wood was heavy and clear. After a few seconds, he heard the sound of slow footsteps inside. The door opened. John stood in the doorway. He was thin, and his face was full of deep lines from the sun. He wore an old, grey shirt and trousers. His eyes were still bright and sharp. When he saw Marcus, a small smile appeared on his face. "Marcus," John said. His voice was low and a bit raspy. "It is early for a visit. Come inside." The inside of the house was small and crowded. There were fishing nets on the walls and old lanterns on the tables. The room smelled like dried tobacco and old paper. John sat down in a large wooden chair. Marcus sat across from him. Without saying a word, Marcus took the yellow paper from his coat. He spread it out on the table between them. John looked at the paper. At first, he did not move. Then, his eyes grew wide. He reached out with a shaking hand and touched the drawing of the silver moon. He did not speak for a long time. The only sound in the room was the soft movement of the water against the wooden poles under the house. "Where did you find this?" John asked. He looked at Marcus with a serious expression. "In a bottle on the beach," Marcus answered. "What is it, John? Is it real?" John breathed in deeply. "I heard stories about this when I was a young sailor. People call it the silver moon. Many men looked for it a long time ago. They thought it was just a legend. They said the treasure is not gold, but something much more beautiful." "The map shows an island," Marcus said. "I want to find it. But I need a ship. My old ship is gone." John nodded slowly. He looked at the map again. "This map is very old, Marcus. The path is dangerous. There are rocks and storms that can break a ship into pieces. But you are a good captain. You have the heart for this journey." John stood up and walked to a small cupboard. He took out a heavy bag of coins. "I cannot sail with you because my legs are weak," John said. "But I have some gold. Take it. Go to the shipyards. Buy a ship that is strong and fast. You will also need a crew that you can trust." Marcus looked at the gold and then at his friend. He felt a strong sense of hope. "Thank you, John. I will return for you when I find the heart of the island." John smiled and shook his head. "Just find the truth, Marcus. That is enough." Marcus took the gold and the map. He left the small house and walked back into the bright sunlight. He knew what he had to do next. He needed a ship that could fight the wind and the waves. Marcus walked to the north side of the docks. This was the shipyard. It was a place of hard work and loud noises. The air was filled with the smell of fresh wood and black tar. Men used heavy tools to shape large pieces of timber. The sound of hammers hitting metal echoed between the buildings. Marcus looked at the many ships sitting in the water. Some were small fishing boats. Others were massive ships for carrying heavy goods. He needed something special. He wanted a ship that was fast enough to run from danger, but strong enough to survive a storm. He also had to be careful. He had John's gold, but he did not want to waste it. He walked past a ship with old, grey sails and shook his head. That ship was too slow. He walked past another ship that was very large, but the wood looked thin. Finally, he saw a man standing near a beautiful ship in the corner of the yard. The man was tall and had a very red face from the sun. He wore a dirty leather apron and held a list in his hand. This was Mr. Henderson, the owner of the shipyard. "Are you looking for a ship, Captain?" Mr. Henderson asked. He looked at Marcus's blue coat and his serious eyes. He knew Marcus was an experienced sailor. "I am," Marcus said. "I need a ship that can sail through deep water and heavy winds. It must be strong." Mr. Henderson pointed to the ship behind him. "This is the Venture," he said with a smile. "She is the best ship I have. She has a double hull. This means the wood is very thick. She can hit a rock and stay afloat. The masts are made of strong pine, and the sails are brand new." Marcus climbed a wooden ladder to get onto the deck. He walked across the ship. The floor was solid under his boots. He touched the large wooden wheel and turned it. It moved smoothly. He went below the deck to look at the storage area. There was plenty of space for barrels of water and bags of food. He could also see a small cabin for the captain. The ship felt right. It felt like it belonged to him. He went back down the ladder to Mr. Henderson. "How much gold do you want for the venture?" Marcus asked. Mr. Henderson named a high price. Marcus looked at his bag of gold. He knew he needed to save some money to pay a crew and buy supplies. "The price is a bit high," Marcus said calmly. "The ropes are a little dry, and the anchor is rusty. I will give you a fair price, but not that much." The two men talked for a long time. Finally, Mr. Henderson nodded his head. "You are a difficult man, Captain, but I accept. The ship is yours." Marcus felt a surge of joy. He took a piece of white chalk from his pocket. He walked to the front of the ship. He crossed out the name Venture. In large, clear letters, he wrote, "The Silver Moon." He had his ship. Now, he needed a crew. The sun was high in the sky now. Marcus stood on the deck of the Silver Moon. The ship was ready, but it was empty. A ship without a crew is just a piece of wood in the water. Marcus needed people who were brave and strong. He went back to the busy streets near the docks. He walked to a large building called the Anchor. It was a place where sailors went to eat and talk. The room was dark and filled with the smell of roasted meat. Marcus stood on a wooden chair so everyone could see him. He looked at the faces in the room. There were men and women from many different lands. Most of them looked tired, but some had a spark of adventure in their eyes. "Listen to me," Marcus shouted. His voice was deep and reached every corner of the room. "I am Captain Marcus. I have a ship named the Silver Moon. She is a fine ship, and she is ready to sail. I am looking for a crew. We are going on a long journey to find something special. The path is not easy. There will be storms and there will be danger. But if we succeed, there will be gold and glory for everyone." The room became very quiet. The sailors looked at each other. Then, a woman stood up from a table in the back. She was tall and had long, dark hair tied behind her head. She wore a leather vest and a sharp knife was at her belt. She walked toward Marcus with a steady step. "My name is Elena," she said. Her voice was calm. "I am a good sailor. I can climb the highest mast in a storm, and I am not afraid of a fight. I want to see new lands. Do you have a place for me?" Marcus looked into her eyes. He saw strength there. "Welcome to the crew, Elena," he said. Next, a very large man with broad shoulders stood up. He had a friendly face but hands as big as plates. "I am Barnaby," the man said. "I am strong. I can pull the heaviest ropes and move the biggest barrels. I am looking for a fresh start." "I need your strength, Barnaby," Marcus replied. "Join us." Slowly, more people came forward. There was a woman named Sarah who was an expert with sails, and a man named Thomas who knew how to cook food that stayed fresh for weeks. Marcus talked to each person. He wanted to make sure they were honest and hardworking. He did not want people who were lazy or unkind. By the end of the hour, Marcus had 12 people. They were all adults with different skills. They stood together in the middle of the room. Marcus felt proud. This was the beginning of a family. "Go to the shipyard," Marcus told them. "Look for the ship with the silver name. We leave soon. Prepare your things and say your goodbyes. Our journey starts tonight." The new crew members nodded and began to leave the building. Marcus felt a mix of nerves and happiness. He had his ship, and now he had his team. The secret of the Silver Moon was waiting for them out on the deep, blue sea. The sun went down, and the sky became a deep, dark purple. The stars began to shine like small white lights. The town was quiet now. Most people were sleeping in their beds. But on the docks, the Silver Moon was full of life. The crew worked together in the shadows. They did not use lanterns because they did not want the port guards to see them. Barnaby was moving heavy barrels of water onto the deck. He was very quiet for such a big man. Elena stood at the back of the ship. She was checking the ropes and the sails. She moved quickly and surely. Marcus stood on the pier and watched the street. He saw two guards walking far away. They carried bright lanterns that moved back and forth. "Is everything ready?" Marcus whispered. "The food and water are on board, Captain." Elena whispered back. "The crew is at their stations. We are ready to go." Marcus looked at the town one last time. He knew that the local leaders did not want ships to leave without paying extra taxes. He did not have enough gold for taxes and for a long journey. He had to be smart. He stepped onto the wooden deck of his ship. The wood felt cool under his boots. "Untie the ropes," Marcus ordered softly. Two crew members jumped onto the pier. They quickly unlooped the heavy ropes from the wooden posts. They jumped back onto the ship as it began to drift away from the land. The ship moved slowly at first. There was a light wind, but it was not enough to move the large vessel quickly. "Sarah, open the small sails," Marcus said. Sarah and two other sailors pulled on the ropes. The white cloth of the sails opened quietly. The wind caught the fabric, and the ship began to move faster. The sound of the water against the side of the ship was soft and steady. Marcus held the large wooden wheel. He felt the power of the ocean. Suddenly, a shout came from the shore. One of the guards had seen the dark shape of the ship moving away. The guard ran to the edge of the water and waved his lantern. He called out for the ship to stop, but Marcus did not listen. He turned the wheel, and the silver moon pointed toward the open sea. "We are moving now," Barnaby said with a low laugh. The ship passed the last lighthouse at the edge of the harbor. The light from the tower passed over the deck for a second. Then everything was dark again. The town became smaller and smaller behind them. Soon, they could only see the tiny lights of the houses. Marcus looked at the horizon. The air was colder here, and the waves were bigger. He felt a sense of freedom. They were no longer near the land and its rules. They were on the open ocean. "Well done, everyone," Marcus said to the crew. "Get some rest if you are not on watch. Tomorrow, the real work begins." The crew started to move to their sleeping areas. Elena stayed with Marcus. They looked at the dark water together. The journey to find the silver moon had truly started. The next morning, the sun rose over a world of water. There was no land in sight. In every direction, the ocean was a deep, bright blue. The air was clean and cold. On the deck of the silver moon, the crew was already busy. Life at sea had a rhythm, and everyone had a job to do. Barnaby was in charge of the heavy work. He moved large coils of rope and checked the barrels of food in the storage room. He was a cheerful man. He hummed a low song as he worked, though he did not use any words. His large muscles moved under his shirt as he lifted a heavy crate of apples. "The sea is calm today, Captain," Barnaby said as Marcus walked past. "It is a good start." Marcus replied. He looked up at the sails. They were full of wind, pushing the ship forward. Elena was at the front of the ship. She held a small metal tool and looked at the sun. She was checking their position. She had a notebook where she wrote down numbers and drew small stars. She was very focused. Marcus joined her. "Are we on the right path?" he asked. Elena pointed to the horizon. "Yes. The map says we must go east for 3 days. If the wind stays like this, we will reach the first island on time." Marcus took the old paper from his coat. He looked at the drawing of the silver moon. In the bright daylight, the ink seemed to shimmer. He thought about the message, "The silver shines in the dark." He wondered what it really meant. Was the treasure made of silver, or was it something else? During the afternoon, Marcus spent time with the rest of the crew. He watched Sarah climb the tall masts to fix a loose rope. She moved like a cat, high above the deck. He talked to Thomas in the small kitchen. Thomas was making a large pot of vegetable soup. The smell was wonderful and made everyone feel hungry. A full stomach makes a happy crew, Thomas said with a smile. As the sun began to go down, the water changed color. It turned from blue to a dark gold, then to a deep purple. The rhythm of the waves was like a heartbeat. The ship rose and fell slowly. Some of the crew felt a little sick from the movement, but they did not complain. They were proud to be on this journey. Marcus stood at the wheel as the first stars appeared. He felt the wood of the ship under his hands. The Silver Moon was a good ship. She felt strong and safe. He knew the calm weather would not last forever. The ocean was a place of change. But for now, they were moving fast and the crew was working well together. He looked at the dark water and felt a sense of peace. They were far away from the world they knew. They were into the blue, and the adventure was truly their own. The calm weather did not last. On the fourth day, the air felt different. It was heavy and very warm. Marcus stood on the deck and looked at the horizon. In the distance, he saw a line of dark clouds. They were not white and fluffy like the clouds from the day before. These clouds were thick, heavy, and the color of old lead. They moved across the sky very fast. The wind is changing, Elena said. She stood next to Marcus. She was holding her compass, but the needle was moving in circles. The sea is becoming angry. Marcus looked down at the water. The beautiful blue color was gone. Now, the ocean was a dark, cold green. The waves were getting taller. They had white foam on top that looked like teeth. The ship began to roll from side to side. It was harder to walk on the deck now. All hands on deck, Marcus shouted. His voice was loud and clear over the rising wind. The crew came out of the cabins and the kitchen. They knew what to do. They worked together to prepare for the storm. Sarah and two other sailors climbed the masts. They had to pull the large sails down and tie them tight. If the wind was too strong, it could tear the sails or break the wooden masts. High above the deck, the wind pulled at Sarah's clothes, but she did not let go. On the deck, Barnaby was busy. He used thick ropes to tie down the water barrels and the extra wood. He did not want anything to slide across the floor. If a heavy barrel hit a crew member, it could cause a bad injury. His face was wet with sweat and salt water, but he did not stop working. The first drop of rain fell. Then another. Soon, the rain was falling very hard. It hit the wooden deck like small stones. It was difficult to see the front of the ship. The sky was so dark that it looked like night, even though it was only afternoon. Hold on to something, Marcus yelled. A massive wave hit the side of the Silver Moon. The ship lifted high into the air and then dropped down. A large amount of cold water poured over the deck. Marcus held the wheel with all his strength. His muscles were tight and his knuckles were white. He felt the power of the ocean trying to take the ship from him. The wind was a constant, loud whistle in his ears. The ship made deep, groaning noises as the wood moved against the waves. Every person on the crew was wet and cold, but they stayed at their posts. They trusted their captain, and they trusted their ship. Marcus looked into the darkness. He could not see the stars or the sun. He only saw the white foam of the waves. He knew they had to survive this night. The Silver Moon was strong, but the storm was stronger. They had to fight for every inch of the sea. The morning sun rose over a quiet sea. The sky was no longer gray. It was a soft, pale blue. The wind was a gentle breeze that felt cool on Marcus's face. However, the deck of the Silver Moon did not look beautiful. It was covered in wet sand, broken pieces of wood, and tangled ropes. The great storm was over, but it had left its mark on the ship. Marcus stood at the wheel, his body aching from the long night. He looked up at the main mast. The large white sail was torn in the middle. It hung like a broken wing, flapping uselessly in the wind. "Everyone, wake up!" Marcus called out. His voice was tired but firm. "The sun is up, and we have work to do." The crew climbed out from the lower decks. They looked exhausted. Their clothes were still damp, and their hair was messy with salt. Elena was the first to reach Marcus. She looked at the compass and then at the horizon. "We are still on the right path," she said, "but we are moving slowly. Without that sail, we will lose days of time." "Then we fix it now," Marcus said. "Sarah, take 2 people and get the heavy needles. Barnaby, check the storage room for more rope." Sarah grabbed a bag of thick thread and climbed the wooden ladder. She was not afraid of the height. She reached the crossbar of the mast and sat on it. From there, she began to pull the heavy fabric of the sail toward her. It was difficult work. The wet cloth was very heavy and cold. She pushed the large needle through the thick material over and over. Her fingers were sore, but she did not stop. On the deck, Barnaby and Thomas worked together. A large barrel of fresh water had broken during the storm. The water was gone, and the wooden boards were slippery. They used mops to clean the deck and hammers to fix the broken wood. Marcus joined them, helping to pull a thick rope that had fallen into the water. It was heavy and full of seaweed. Together, they pulled it back onto the ship. "The wood is strong," Barnaby said, hitting a nail into the floor. "The ship is wounded, but she is not broken." By noon, the sun was hot. The crew worked in silence, focused on their tasks. The sound of Sarah's needle and the rhythm of the hammers were the only noises. Slowly, the ship began to look like itself again. The torn sail was stitched back together. The ropes were coiled neatly on the deck. The mess from the storm was gone. Marcus looked at his crew. They were tired, but they were smiling. They had survived their first big test together. They were not just individuals anymore. They were a team. "The sail is ready," Sarah shouted from above. "Drop it," Marcus commanded. The white cloth fell and opened wide. It caught the wind, and the ship suddenly moved forward with a new energy. The water began to hum against the hull once more. They were moving again, faster and stronger than before. The journey to the silver moon continued. The ship sailed across the calm water. The repairs from the day before were strong, and the white sails were full of wind. Marcus stood at the front of the ship, looking at the blue horizon. It felt like they were the only people in the world. The ocean was quiet, and the only sound was the water moving against the side of the boat. Suddenly, Sarah pointed to the sky. "Look over there," she called out. Marcus looked up. At first, he only saw the bright sun. Then, he saw a small, dark shape. It was moving quickly toward the ship. It was not a cloud, it was a bird. As it came closer, Marcus saw that it was not a common seabird. It did not have white or gray feathers like the gulls near the port. The bird circled the ship 3 times. Its feathers were a beautiful, bright green. Its tail was long and had feathers of deep red and gold. It was a tropical bird from a place with many trees and flowers. The bird seemed very tired. It landed on the wooden railing near the back of the ship. It moved its head from side to side, looking at the crew with small, black eyes. The bird made a loud, sharp cry. It was a strong sound that echoed across the quiet deck. It was not a sad noise. It was full of energy. "A green bird," Barnaby said, walking closer. He moved slowly so he did not scare the visitor. "I have not seen a bird like this in many years. This is a very good sign." Elena came over to join them. She did not touch the bird, but she looked at it very carefully. She checked her map and then looked at the bird again. "Barnaby is right," Elena said. These birds do not like the deep ocean. They live in the jungle. They need tall trees to sleep and fresh fruit to eat. If this bird is here, it means land is very near. It probably got lost in the storm and saw our ship as a place to rest. Marcus felt a wave of relief. They had been at sea for a long time. Their fresh water was low, and the crew was tired of eating dry bread and salted meat. The thought of a green island with fresh water and fruit was very exciting for everyone. "Which way do we go, Elena?" Marcus asked. Elena watched the bird. The small animal rested for a few minutes. It cleaned its bright feathers with its beak. Then, it stretched its wings and flew up into the air. It did not fly back toward the west. It flew straight ahead, toward the east. "We follow the bird," Elena said. "It is going home. Change our direction." Marcus ordered. "Follow that bird. We are close now." The crew moved with new energy. They pulled the ropes and turned the wheel. The ship turned slightly to the right. Everyone was looking at the horizon now. They wanted to be the first person to see the green trees of the island. The secret of the silver moon felt closer than ever. The bird became a small speck in the sky again, but the crew did not stop watching. "Land! Land ahead!" Sarah shouted from the top of the mast. Her voice was full of joy. Marcus ran to the front of the ship. He held his glass lens to his eye and looked at the horizon. In the middle of the bright blue water, there was a small, green shape. As the ship sailed closer, the shape became very clear. The island had a large, round hill in the center and a long, low point of land at one end. It looked exactly like a giant turtle sleeping in the sea. Turtle Island. Marcus whispered. He remembered the name from one of John's old stories. The water near the island changed from deep blue to a light, clear green. Marcus could see the yellow sand and small fish under the waves. He did not want the ship to hit any hidden rocks. "Drop the anchor," he commanded. The heavy metal anchor fell into the water with a large spray. The ship stopped moving and rested quietly in the bay. The crew lowered a small wooden boat into the ocean. Marcus, Barnaby, and Elena climbed inside. Barnaby took the oars. He was very strong, and the boat moved quickly toward the shore. The wooden oars moved through the water with a steady, soft rhythm. When the boat touched the sand, Marcus jumped out. The sand was warm and very soft. He felt the solid ground under his boots for the first time in many days. It was a strange but wonderful feeling. The air on the island was different from the air at sea. It was sweet and heavy. It smelled like tropical flowers and wet earth. "Look there," Elena said. She pointed toward a group of thick, dark trees. "I see the movement of water." They walked past some tall palm trees. The leaves were very long and moved slowly in the breeze. Behind the trees, they found a small stream of clear water. It moved over smooth, gray stones. Marcus bent down and put his hands into the stream. The water was very cool. He took a drink and smiled. "The water is fresh and clean," Marcus said. "Go back to the ship and tell the crew to bring the empty barrels. We must fill them all." Barnaby was looking at the trees above them. "Captain, look at this," he said. He reached up and pulled a large, yellow fruit from a branch. He used his knife to cut it open. The inside was a bright, juicy orange. He took a bite and a happy expression covered his face. "This is much better than the dry bread on the ship." They spent the rest of the afternoon working hard. They filled their barrels with fresh water and gathered bags of sweet fruit. The sun was warm on their backs, and the sound of the birds in the trees was peaceful. For a few hours, they forgot about the dangers of the ocean and the mystery of the map. They were just happy to be on land. As the sun began to set, the island turned a deep, glowing gold. Marcus looked back at the silver moon. The ship looked beautiful sitting in the quiet water. They had everything they needed now. Tomorrow, they would look at the map again and find the next path. The first part of their journey was a success. The next morning, the crew of the Silver Moon pulled the anchor from the sea. Marcus looked at the map again. Turtle Island was a good place for water, but it was not the final destination. The map showed a second, smaller island nearby. This island had a very long beach on its eastern side. According to the old drawing, this was the place where the journey into the jungle began. The ship sailed for 3 hours. The wind was strong and helpful. Soon, a new island appeared. It was different from the last one. It did not have a high hill. Instead, it was flat and covered in the brightest sand Marcus had ever seen. In the sunlight, the sand looked like a path of pure gold. That must be the Golden Beach, Elena said. She stood at the front of the ship with her compass. The map says we must land exactly in the middle of the curve. Marcus steered the ship carefully. The water was shallow here. He could see large rocks under the surface. He did not want to damage the hull of his new ship. When they were close enough, they used the small boat again. This time, Marcus took 5 crew members with him. They carried bags for supplies and short swords for safety. As they stepped onto the beach, the sand felt very hot. It was fine and soft. It made a soft noise under their boots as they walked. The beach was very wide. On one side was the blue ocean, and on the other side was a wall of dark, thick trees. The trees were so close together that Marcus could not see what was inside. Look for a sign, Marcus told the crew. The map shows a mark on a stone near the trees. The crew spread out. They walked slowly along the edge of the jungle. Barnaby looked under the large leaves of the palm trees. Sarah looked near the white rocks. The sun was very hot, and the air was still. There was no wind here. The only sound was the steady movement of the ocean behind them. After an hour of searching, Elena called out, "Captain! Over here!" Marcus ran to her. She was standing near a large, grey stone. The stone was half buried in the sand. It was covered in green moss and dry vines. Marcus used his hand to pull the vines away. Under the plants, there was a drawing carved into the rock. It was a circle with a crescent moon inside it. The silver moon. Marcus whispered. He felt a cold shiver of excitement. This is the start of the path. Behind the stone, there was a small opening in the trees. It was dark and looked very difficult to enter. The plants were thick and had long thorns. Marcus looked at his crew. They were all looking at the dark forest. They knew the easy part of the trip was over. The beach was beautiful, but the secret was hidden in the shadows of the trees. "We found the door," Marcus said. He looked at the sun. It was starting to move down. "We will go back to the ship for the night. We need our rest. Tomorrow, we enter the jungle." They walked back to the small boat. Marcus looked at the Golden Beach one last time. It was a peaceful place, but he knew that danger was waiting for them behind the mossy stone. The next morning, the sun was a bright eye in the sky. Marcus and his team returned to the Golden Beach. They carried water, dried meat, and sharp tools. Marcus stood before the dark opening in the trees. He held a long sword in his right hand. He did not use it for fighting today. He used it to cut the thick green vines that blocked their way. "Stay close together," Marcus said to the crew. "The jungle is a maze. It is easy to get lost if you wander away." They stepped into the forest. Immediately, the temperature changed. The heat was different here. It was heavy and wet. The light of the sun could not reach the ground because the leaves above were so thick. Everything was a deep, dark green. The ground was soft and covered in old, brown leaves and wet mud. Marcus led the way. He hit the thick branches with his sword to clear a path. Each movement was hard work. Sweat ran down his face and neck. Behind him, Barnaby carried the heaviest bag of supplies. Even for a strong man, the jungle was difficult. Elena walked in the middle, holding the old map. She looked at the trees and the shape of the land very carefully. The jungle was full of life, but it was hard to see. They heard the movement of many animals. There was a constant rustling in the high leaves. Large birds with blue wings flew over their heads, making loud, sharp cries. Marcus described the sounds in his mind. The forest seemed to breathe. Every time they stepped on a dry branch, a loud snap echoed through the trees. "Look at the ground," Elena whispered. Marcus stopped and looked down. Under the layers of mud and leaves, he saw something hard and flat. He used his boot to push the dirt away. There were large, grey stones placed in a straight line. They were old and covered in green moss, but they were clearly made by people. "This is not just a forest," Marcus said. "This is a road. Someone built this path a long time ago." The discovery gave the crew new energy. They followed the stone path deeper into the jungle. It was easier to walk now, but the air was still very thin and hot. They saw strange, beautiful flowers. Some were as large as a man's head and had a very sweet, heavy smell. Others had bright spots that looked like eyes. "Do not touch the plants," Elena warned. "In a place like this, beauty often hides danger." They walked for many hours. The path began to go up a small hill. The trees became a little thinner, and they could see small patches of the blue sky again. Marcus looked back. He could no longer see the ocean or the golden beach. They were deep inside the heart of the island. Suddenly, the path stopped. In front of them was a wall of solid rock. It was covered in hanging vines and small, white flowers. Marcus moved the vines aside with his sword. He saw a flat surface of grey stone. It was not a natural wall. It was a gate. Marcus stood in front of the tall stone wall. It was hidden behind a curtain of thick green vines. He used his hands to pull the plants away. Under the leaves, he did not find more rock. He found a massive door made of dark, heavy iron. The metal was old and covered in orange rust, but it still looked very strong. "This is it," Marcus said. His voice was quiet because he felt a great sense of respect for the place. The ancient gate from the stories. The door was set deep into the side of a small mountain. Around the edges of the iron, there were beautiful carvings in the stone. There were drawings of the sun, the stars, and the ocean waves. In the very center of the iron door, there was a large circle. Inside the circle was the shape of a moon. It matched the drawing on the old map perfectly. Elena walked closer and touched the metal. It was very cold, even though the jungle air was hot. She looked at the center of the moon symbol. "There is a small hole here," she said. "It is a lock. But it is not a normal lock. The shape is very strange." Barnaby stepped forward. He put his large hands against the iron and pushed with all his strength. His face turned red and his muscles became tight. The door did not move. It was as solid as the mountain itself. Barnaby stopped and took a deep breath. "It is no use, Captain," Barnaby said. 100 men could not push this door open. It is locked from the inside by a heavy mechanism. Marcus looked at the lock. The hole was shaped like a star with 6 points. He looked at his own tools, but he had nothing that would fit. The crew stood in silence. The only sound was the wind moving through the high trees and the distant cry of a bird. The jungle felt very old and very still. It felt like the gate was watching them. "We cannot break it," Marcus said. "And we cannot climb over it. The mountain is too steep and the rocks are sharp." He felt a moment of disappointment. They had traveled so far. They had survived a storm and walked through the thick jungle. Now, a door of iron was stopping them. He looked at the map again, but it did not mention a key. It only showed the location of the gate. Maybe the key is hidden nearby, Sarah suggested. She began to look under the rocks and near the roots of the trees. No, Elena said, shaking her head. A key for a door like this would not be left under a stone. It is a special object. It belongs to someone. Marcus looked back at the dark path they had traveled. He thought about the mystery of the island. He knew they were missing something. Just then, he remembered the stranger they had found on the ship. The man was still back on the ship with the rest of the crew. Marcus wondered why that man had been hiding in the storage room. We need to go back, Marcus said. But we will not leave this place forever. We will find a way to open this door. The silver moon is waiting for us behind this iron. They turned away from the gate. The sun was starting to go down, and the shadows in the jungle were becoming long and thin. The mystery of the ancient gate was still unsolved, but Marcus was more determined than ever. Marcus and his team returned to the silver moon as the moon began to rise. The water was dark, and the ship's lanterns cast a warm, yellow glow on the deck. Marcus did not go to his cabin to rest. Instead, he went to the small, locked room at the bottom of the ship. Inside was the stranger they had found earlier in the journey. The man was sitting on a wooden bench. He looked up when Marcus entered. He was a tall man with light hair and a thin, clever face. He did not look like a pirate or a common sailor. He looked like a man who spent his time reading books. The jungle was thick, but we found the iron gate, Marcus said. He sat down across from the man. The lock is shaped like a star with 6 points. We could not open it. I think you know why. The stranger remained silent for a moment. He looked at Marcus's tired face and dirty boots. Then, he spoke. His voice was soft and very clear. My name is Julian. I was a student of history before I came to this ocean. My family lived on these islands many years ago. They were the ones who built the gate and the secret rooms inside the mountain. Why did you hide on my ship? Marcus asked. He was not angry, but he wanted the truth. I needed to find a captain who was brave enough to reach the island. Julian answered. Many men talk about the silver moon, but most are afraid of the storms and the jungle. I saw you at the port. I saw the way you looked at the sea. I knew you were the right man. Julian reached inside his grey shirt. He pulled out a long leather string that was hidden around his neck. At the end of the string was a beautiful object. It was a key made of pure, bright silver. It was shaped exactly like a star with 6 points. In the light of the lantern, the key seemed to glow with its own light. It was covered in tiny, detailed carvings of leaves and stars. This is the star of the moon, Julian said. He held the key out to Marcus. It is the only thing that can move the iron gears of the gate. Without it, the door will stay shut forever. Marcus took the key. It was much heavier than it looked. It felt very cold in his hand, almost like a piece of ice. He looked at Julian. You are coming with us tomorrow, Marcus said. You know the history of this place. We need your help to understand what is behind that door. Julian nodded. I will come. But be careful, Captain. The treasure is not just gold. There are things in that mountain that have been sleeping for a long time. The key opens the door, but it also wakes the secrets of the past. Marcus stood up and put the silver key in his pocket. He felt a new sense of purpose. He had the map, he had the ship, and now he had the key. The mystery was finally within his reach. He went up to the deck and looked at the mountain in the distance. Tomorrow, the iron gate would finally open. The sun rose again, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Marcus stood on the deck of the Silver Moon. He felt the weight of the silver key in his pocket. It was a comforting weight. Julian stood beside him, looking toward the green mountains of the island. The crew was ready to move. They had their bags packed and their spirits were high. "We leave in 10 minutes," Marcus announced. But before the first man could step into the small boat, Sarah called out from the high mast. Her voice was not full of joy this time. It was sharp and full of worry. "Captain! A ship! To the west!" Marcus pulled his glass lens from his belt. He turned toward the open sea. Far away, a dark shape was moving against the bright morning light. It was a large ship with 3 masts. As it came closer, Marcus saw the color of the sails. They were not white like his own. They were as black as coal. Black sails. Elena whispered. Her face became very pale. "There is only one ship in these waters with sails like that." "Captain Vane," Marcus said. His voice was grim. Captain Vane was a dangerous man. He was known for his cruelty and his hunger for gold. He did not care about history or the beauty of the Silver Moon. He only wanted the treasure. He had been looking for Marcus for a long time. Vane's ship, the Vulture, was famous for being fast and carrying many heavy cannons. The black ship was moving quickly. It had the wind behind it. Marcus could see the foam at the front of the Vulture as it cut through the waves. The rival pirates were not trying to hide. They wanted Marcus to see them. They wanted to show their power. "They found us," Julian said. His hands were shaking slightly. "If Vane gets the key, he will destroy everything inside the mountain. He does not understand the secrets. He will only use fire and iron to get what he wants." Marcus looked at his crew. They were looking at him, waiting for an order. He looked at the mountain and then at the approaching black ship. He knew they did not have much time. If they stayed in the bay, they were trapped. The Vulture could block the exit and hit the Silver Moon with cannon fire. "We cannot go to the jungle yet," Marcus said. "If we leave the ship now, Vane will take it. We must protect our home first." "But we are smaller than them," Barnaby said. "They have more men and more guns." "We are smaller, which means we are faster," Marcus replied. "And we know these shallow waters better than they do. We will lead them away from the island. We will use the rocks and the wind." A loud, deep roar came from the distance. It was the sound of a cannon from the Vulture. A large ball of iron hit the water a few hundred meters away, creating a giant splash of white spray. The warning was clear. The battle for the Silver Moon had begun before they even reached the treasure. The black sails of the Vulture were like dark shadows against the morning sun. Marcus saw the pirate ship turn. They were trying to block the entrance to the bay. If they succeeded, the Silver Moon would be trapped against the shore. Marcus knew they could not stay and fight in the shallow water. "Barnaby, raise the anchor now," Marcus shouted. His voice was steady, but he moved with great speed. Barnaby and 3 other strong men ran to the heavy wooden machine at the front of the ship. They pushed the wooden bars with all their strength. The heavy iron chain began to come up from the deep, blue water. It made a loud, grinding noise against the side of the ship. Marcus could see the mud and seaweed on the anchor as it rose. Elena stood near the wheel, looking at the map. "Captain, if we stay here, they will pin us against the rocks," she said. Her hands were white because she was holding the railing so tightly. "The Vulture has more cannons than we do." "I know," Marcus replied. He looked at the coast. "We need to go south. There is a narrow passage between 2 tall rocks near the end of the island. It is a dangerous path, but it is too small for a ship as big as the Vulture." The crew moved with incredible focus. Sarah climbed the masts again. She let the large sails fall into the wind. The breeze was coming from the side now. The silver moon tilted to one side as the fabric caught the air. Marcus grabbed the large wooden wheel. He felt the ship wake up under his feet. The ship began to move away from the golden beach. On the Vulture, Marcus could see the rival pirates. They were standing on the deck, waving their swords and shouting. A cloud of grey smoke came from the side of the black ship. A second cannonball hit the water. This one was much closer than the first. It sent a giant shower of salty water over the deck of the Silver Moon. Julian fell to his knees, covering his head with his hands. "Stand up, Julian," Marcus said firmly. "We are not finished yet. Hold on to the mast." The ship reached the narrow opening between the cliffs. The rocks on both sides were very high, sharp, and black. Marcus had to be very careful. If the wooden hull touched the stone, the ship would break apart and sink. The water here was white and moved very fast. It was like a river inside the ocean. The silver moon danced through the gap. The crew held their breath as the ship moved between the walls of stone. They could almost touch the cold, wet surface of the cliffs. The Vulture tried to follow, but it was too wide. Its captain had to turn the wheel quickly to avoid a terrible crash. The black ship slowed down as it searched for a wider path around the rocks. "We made it through," Sarah yelled from the mast. "For now," Marcus said. He did not relax his grip on the wheel. He looked back and saw the black sails turning. Vane was still behind them, and he was not going to give up. The chase was moving into the deep, open ocean. Marcus knew they had to be smarter than Vane to survive the night. The silver moon was back in the open water. The sun was now high and hot in the sky. Marcus looked back over his shoulder. The black sails of the Vulture appeared again from behind the tall, dark cliffs. Captain Vane was not a man who quit easily. He had more wind in his sails now, and his large ship was gaining speed quickly. "They are coming fast," Elena shouted. She stood at the back of the ship, watching the distance between the two vessels. Marcus knew they could not just run forever. On a straight path, the Vulture was the faster ship because it had more sails. "To the cannons," Marcus ordered. His voice was loud and reached every sailor on the deck. "Prepare the iron balls. We must slow them down or they will catch us before dark." Barnaby and the other sailors ran to the side of the ship. They pulled the heavy, black cannons forward. The wheels made a grinding noise on the wooden floor. They loaded the gunpowder and the heavy metal spheres with careful hands. The crew worked with sweat on their faces. They knew that one good hit from Vane could end their journey and their lives. A cloud of thick, grey smoke appeared on the side of the Vulture. A second later, a deep roar filled the air, shaking the very boards of the ship. A cannonball flew through the sky, trailing a thin line of smoke. It missed the ship but hit the water so close that the silver moon rocked violently. A wall of salty water fell onto the deck. "Wait for my signal," Marcus yelled. He watched the movements of the black ship through his lens. He wanted to wait until the Vulture was turning. When a ship turns, it is a larger target. The rival ship fired again. This time, the iron ball hit the wooden railing at the back of the silver moon. Pieces of wood flew into the air like small, sharp arrows. One piece hit a sailor's shoulder, and he fell to the deck. Sarah ran to help him, pulling him away from the edge, while the others stayed at their posts. "Now! Fire!" Marcus shouted. Barnaby pulled the rope on the first cannon. A massive flash of light and a cloud of white smoke came from the side of the ship. The silver moon pushed back against the water from the power of the shot. The crew fired 3 more cannons in a row. The sound was like a heavy weight hitting the earth. Marcus watched closely. One of the iron balls hit the front of the Vulture. It did not sink the ship, but it broke a part of the wood near the water. Another ball hit the black fabric of a sail, tearing a large, jagged hole in it. "Good hit," Barnaby cried out. The Vulture slowed down slightly as the pirates tried to manage their torn sail. However, they did not stop. They continued to fire their guns, and the air became thick with the smell of burnt powder and salt. "We cannot stay in a fight like this," Marcus said to Elena. "They have more guns than we do. We need to find a place to hide." Elena looked at the map and then at the horizon. "The sun is moving down," she said. "If we can reach the rocks at the edge of the island, we can hide in the shadows." The sun was sinking low, painting the sky with dark reds and purples. The smoke from the cannons hung in the air like a heavy ghost. Marcus felt the heat of the battle on his skin, but his mind was cold and focused. He looked at the coast of the island. The cliffs were tall and black. They looked like giant teeth rising from the sea. "Captain, look there," Elena said. She was pointing to a part of the cliff that looked solid. "The map shows a hidden entrance. It is a narrow cove. If we can reach it, the darkness will hide us." Marcus turned the wheel with all his strength. The silver moon leaned to the side as she turned toward the rocks. Behind them, the Vulture fired one last cannon. The iron ball flew high over their masts and landed far away with a large splash of white water. The darkness was growing, and it was becoming harder for Captain Vane to see his target. The ship approached the wall of stone. To a normal sailor, it looked like a place of death. But Marcus saw the small gap. It was a narrow passage, hidden by long, hanging plants and the shadow of the mountain. Sarah dropped the small sails. "Barnaby, get the poles ready," Marcus commanded in a low voice. He did not want his voice to carry across the water. The ship slowed down. It moved into the shadows of the cliffs. The temperature dropped immediately. The air was cool and smelled like wet stone. On both sides of the ship, the rocks were so close that the sailors could reach out and touch them. The silver moon glided quietly through the water. There was no noise except for the soft movement of the ocean against the wooden hull. They entered a small, round area of water. It was perfectly calm. The high walls of the cliff blocked the wind and the light of the stars. It was like being inside a large stone room. The water was so still that it looked like a black mirror. "Stop the ship," Marcus whispered. The crew moved like ghosts. They dropped a small anchor slowly so it did not make a loud splash. They stood still on the deck, their eyes wide in the dark. A few minutes later, they heard a deep, steady sound from outside the cove. It was the Vulture. The black ship was sailing past their hiding spot, through the narrow gap in the rocks. Marcus could see the orange glow of the rival ship's lanterns moving across the waves. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They waited in total silence until the orange light faded and the sound of the Vulture was gone. "They missed us," Barnaby said, his voice a tiny whisper. "For now," Marcus replied. He felt the tension finally leave his shoulders. "We stay here tonight. We do not light any lanterns or fires. We must remain invisible. We wait for the morning to finish our journey to the gate." The crew sat on the deck in the dark. They were tired, but they were safe. The silver moon was hidden in the heart of the stone, and the secret of the island was only a short distance away. The silver moon sat quietly in the dark water of the hidden cove. The high stone walls around them blocked the light of the stars. It was so dark that Marcus could not see his own hands. He called the main crew members to the center of the deck. They gathered around a small table. A single, very dim lantern sat on the table. Its light was weak, but it was enough to see the old map and the faces of the crew. "Captain Vane is still out there," Marcus began. His voice was a low whisper. "He is looking for us. He has guards on the Golden Beach and near the jungle path. We cannot wait for the morning. If we wait, he will find the gate and use his cannons to break it. The jungle is dangerous at night, Elena said. She looked at the dark forest beyond the rocks. We cannot see the path. There are animals that hunt in the dark, and the vines are like traps for our feet. Julian stepped forward into the dim light. He touched the silver key in his hand. We must go tonight, he said. The name of the treasure is the Silver Moon for a reason. My ancestors built the lock to work best when the moon is at its highest point in the sky. The light helps the gears move smoothly. If we go during the day, the mechanism might be too heavy to turn. Marcus looked at Barnaby. How many men can we take without making too much noise? 4 or 5. Barnaby answered. He was cleaning his short sword with a piece of cloth. If we take more, we will be too loud. The dry leaves on the ground will tell the guards where we are. Marcus nodded. Okay, I will go, along with Barnaby, Elena, Julian, and Sarah. The rest of the crew must stay with the ship. Keep the cannons ready. If you hear trouble, do not come for us. Stay hidden and protect the ship. We are the only way home. The crew members looked at each other. They were afraid, but they were also ready. They knew this was the most important part of their journey. They spent the next hour preparing their gear. They covered their bright metal buckles with dark cloth so they would not shine in the moonlight. They put extra oil on their boots to make them move quietly. We will use the small boat to reach the shore, Marcus explained. We will not land on the Golden Beach. We will land further south and walk through the thickest part of the trees. It will be slow, but Vane's men will not see us. Marcus looked up at the thin slice of sky between the cliffs. The moon was rising. It was time to go. They lowered the small boat into the water. It made a very soft ripple on the surface. One by one, the 5 explorers climbed down. They were moving into the heart of the night to find a secret that had been hidden for hundreds of years. The small boat moved across the water like a dark shadow. Barnaby held the oars, but he did not lift them high. He kept them deep in the water to avoid making any splashing noises. The moon was now a giant, silver circle in the sky. It turned the surface of the ocean into a sheet of shining metal. Marcus sat at the front, his eyes fixed on the dark line of the shore. The tide is high, Elena whispered. She looked at the rocks ahead. We must be careful. The waves can push the boat against the stone. They did not go toward the Golden Beach. They could see the orange light of a campfire there. Captain Vane's men were sitting around the fire, talking and laughing. The sound of their voices carried across the water, but they were too far away to see the small boat. Marcus and his team landed on a rocky part of the coast, half a mile away from the beach. When the boat touched a flat rock, they stepped out carefully. The stone was wet and slippery. They pulled the boat into a small gap between 2 boulders and covered it with dark seaweed. Now, it was invisible from the sea and the land. Follow me, Marcus said. He moved toward the edge of the jungle. The forest was different under the moonlight. The shadows were very long and black. The white light of the moon filtered through the high leaves, creating strange patterns on the ground. It was beautiful, but it was also difficult to see. Julian held the silver key tightly in his hand. He was breathing quickly, but he did not stop. They walked in a straight line. They did not use the main stone path because Vane's guards might be watching it. Instead, they moved through the thick bushes. They had to be very quiet. Every time a foot hit a dry leaf, it felt like a loud gunshot in the silent night. Marcus stopped every few minutes to listen. He heard the movement of the wind in the trees and the distant call of an owl. After an hour of walking, they saw the tall cliff again. The ancient iron gate stood there. cold and silent. In the moonlight, the carvings of the sun and the moon seemed to move. The silver moon on the door looked like it was glowing. "We are here," Julian whispered. He walked toward the gate. The silver key in his hand reflected the light of the moon. "Wait," Marcus said. He looked around the small clearing. He wanted to be sure they were alone. The jungle was still. There were no orange campfires here. Vane's men had not found the gate yet. Marcus signaled to his team. They moved toward the door. Julian reached out and touched the iron. He found the star-shaped hole in the center of the moon symbol. His hand was shaking slightly as he moved the silver key toward the lock. "The moon is at its highest point," Julian said. "It is time." Julian pushed the silver key into the star-shaped hole. It fit perfectly. He turned the key slowly. From deep inside the mountain, a heavy grinding sound began. It was the noise of giant stone gears moving after hundreds of years. The ground under their feet shook slightly. The iron door did not open outward. Instead, it slid slowly into the wall of the cliff. A cool, dry wind came from the darkness inside, smelling of old dust and cold metal. "It is open," Julian whispered. He took the key back and stepped inside. Marcus held his lantern high. The light moved across the walls of a long, narrow hallway. The walls were made of smooth, white stone. There were no plants or insects here. They walked forward quietly, their boots making soft echoes on the floor. After a short walk, the hallway opened into a massive room. The crew stopped and gasped. The room was a giant circle. High above, there was a small opening in the ceiling. The silver moonlight fell through the hole like a bright, white pillar. In the center of the room, many statues stood in the light. They were life-sized figures of men and women, but they were not made of stone. They were covered in bright, polished silver. "Look at them," Elena said. She walked toward a statue of a woman holding a star. "They look so real." There were statues of sailors, kings, and animals. Each one was detailed and beautiful. The silver reflected the moonlight, filling the entire chamber with a soft, ghostly glow. It was not a room of gold coins, but a room of history. These were the guardians of the island. Julian explained. He moved his hand near a statue of a large bird. "My people did not believe in money. They believed in memory. Every statue represents a great person from our past." Barnaby walked around the edge of the room. He was looking for danger, but he also looked at the silver. "This is worth more than any chest of gold," he said. His voice was full of wonder. The pirates at the port would go crazy for this. Marcus stood in the center of the circle. He looked at the way the statues were placed. They were not random. They all pointed toward a large, flat stone table at the back of the room. On the table, there was a small box made of dark wood. "The statues are beautiful," Marcus said. "But they are also watching something. They are watching that box." He walked toward the table. The air felt heavy and still. He felt like he was walking through water. Just as he reached for the box, Sarah noticed something on the floor near the entrance. She saw a small piece of dark cloth that did not belong there. "Captain," she said, her voice sharp. "Someone else was here recently. Look at this." Marcus stopped. He looked at the cloth. It was a piece of black sail. Marcus looked at the small piece of black cloth in Sarah's hand. His heart felt heavy. He knew this material. It was the same thick, dark fabric used for the sails of the Vulture. He looked around the circle of his friends. Elena was looking at the statues. Julian was near the stone table. Barnaby was checking the back of the room. But someone was missing. "Where is Roger?" Marcus asked. His voice was sharp. Roger was a quiet sailor who had joined them at the port. He was strong and usually followed every order. He had been with the group when they left the boat, but now he was gone. Marcus looked toward the dark hallway. Suddenly, a bright light appeared at the entrance of the chamber. It was not the soft silver light of the moon. It was the orange, flickering light of many torches. Roger stepped into the room. He was not alone. Behind him stood 6 men with dirty faces and long swords. They were Captain Vane's pirates. Roger was holding a small silver statue of a bird in his hands. He was not looking at it with respect. He was looking at the metal as if it were a bag of food. He had a strange, cold smile on his face. "I am sorry, Captain Marcus," Roger said. He did not sound sorry at all. "The silver moon is a beautiful story. But beauty does not buy a house or a new life. Captain Vane promised me a mountain of gold for this information." "You led them here," Marcus said. He stepped forward, but the pirates raised their swords. "You showed them the hidden path." "It was easy," Roger replied. "I left small pieces of cloth on the branches of the trees. Vane's men just had to follow the signs. They were waiting for us to open the door." One of the pirates, a very tall man with a red scarf, walked into the center of the room. He looked at the silver statues and laughed. "The captain will be very happy," the man said. "He wanted the treasure, and here it is. All we had to do was let Marcus do the hard work." Julian moved toward the wooden box on the table, trying to hide it with his body. "This is not your history," he shouted. "You cannot take these things." The pirate with the red scarf pointed his sword at Julian. "We can take whatever we want. This island belongs to the strongest man, and that man is Captain Vane." Marcus looked at his team. They were outnumbered. Barnaby was ready to fight, but Sarah and Elena were trapped against the wall. The silver statues, which looked like guardians a moment ago, now looked like cold witnesses to a crime. Marcus felt a wave of anger. He had trusted Roger. He had brought a wolf into his own home. "Roger," Marcus said quietly, "you think Vane will let you keep that silver? He does not share. He only takes." Roger's smile faded for a second, but then he shook his head. "I have the silver in my hands right now. That is enough for me." The pirates began to move closer, pushing Marcus and his friends toward the back of the room. The trap was closed. The tall pirate with the red scarf stepped forward. His sword pointed at Marcus's chest. The orange light of the torches made the silver statues look like they were crying. Marcus looked at Julian. The historian was standing near a small stone lever on the wall. Julian's eyes were wide with fear, but he gave a small, quick nod. "Now, Barnaby!" Marcus shouted. Barnaby did not wait. He used his massive shoulders to push over the nearest silver statue. The heavy silver figure of a warrior fell toward the pirates. It hit the stone floor with a deep, ringing sound that shook the room. The pirates had to jump back to avoid being crushed. In the confusion, Julian pulled the stone lever. A small, narrow door opened in the back of the chamber. It was hidden behind a large statue of a lion. "This way! Quick!" Julian cried. Marcus grabbed the small wooden box from the table. He did not have time to look inside. He pushed Elena and Sarah toward the small opening. Barnaby followed them, and Marcus was the last to enter. He looked back and saw the pirates running over the fallen statue. Roger was still holding his small silver bird, looking shocked. The small door led to a narrow tunnel. It was very dark and the ceiling was low. They had to run with their heads down. The air was thin and smelled like wet earth. Behind them, they could hear the heavy boots of the pirates hitting the stone floor. The sounds of the pirates' angry voices echoed through the tunnel. "Keep moving," Marcus urged. They reached the end of the tunnel and came out into the jungle. The night air felt cold and fresh on their faces. The moon was still high, but the trees were so thick that it was hard to see the ground. Marcus led them away from the ancient gate. He did not follow the stone path. He knew the pirates would look there first. They ran through the thick bushes. Thorns pulled at their clothes and branches hit their arms. The jungle was full of movement. Marcus heard the sound of breaking wood behind them. The pirates were not far away. "They are following our noise," Sarah whispered. She was breathing hard. "We need to go toward the cliffs," Julian said. "There is a place where the trees are thinner. We can move faster there." They climbed a steep hill. The ground was slippery with wet leaves. Marcus held the wooden box tightly under his arm. He felt the weight of it. Whatever was inside, it was the reason Vane was here. Suddenly, a loud shout came from their left. A pirate appeared from behind a large tree. He swung a heavy sword at Marcus. Marcus moved quickly to the side. The sound of the sword cutting the air was sharp and close to his ear. Barnaby stepped in and pushed the pirate away with a powerful hand. "Run!" Barnaby told the others. They did not stop. They ran deeper into the trees. The light of the moon created long, white stripes on the forest floor. Marcus felt his heart hitting his chest like a drum. He knew they were not safe yet. The chase in the trees was only beginning, and the ship was still far away. The trees finally became thinner. Marcus could see the silver light of the moon on the water again. They were near the edge of the cliffs. Below them, the ocean moved against the rocks. The silver moon was hidden in the shadows. But she was still there. She looked like a safe home in a world of danger. "We are close," Elena whispered. She was leaning against a tree, trying to catch her breath. Marcus looked behind them. The jungle was dark and full of noise. He could see the light of the pirate torches moving through the branches. The pirates were shouting, but they were still a little far away. However, they were moving fast. "To the boat," Marcus commanded. They ran down the steep, rocky path toward the hidden gap where they left their small boat. Sarah and Julian reached the boat first. They pulled away the dark seaweed. Barnaby stood at the edge of the trees, looking back into the darkness. He held a large wooden branch in his hands. "Go! Get into the boat," Barnaby said. His voice was deep and very serious. "I will slow them down. If they reach the beach, they will shoot at the boat." "Barnaby, come on," Marcus said, grabbing the edge of the boat. "I am right behind you, Captain," Barnaby replied. "Just get the others to safety." Marcus, Elena, Sarah, and Julian jumped into the small boat. The water was cold and the waves were growing. Marcus took the oars and began to pull with all his strength. He looked back at the shore. He saw the first group of pirates come out of the trees. Barnaby stood in their way, using the heavy branch like a giant club. The sounds of a struggle filled the air as the pirates tried to move past the big man. The small boat moved quickly across the dark water. Soon, they reached the side of the silver moon. The crew on the ship was waiting for them. They lowered the rope ladder. One by one, Marcus and the others climbed up to the deck. "Where is Barnaby?" Thomas asked as Marcus stepped onto the wood. Marcus looked back at the dark shore. The pirate torches were now gathered in one spot. He did not see Barnaby. He did not see the big man running toward the water. The beach was quiet now. "He stayed to give us time," Marcus said. His heart felt very heavy. He looked at the wooden box in his hand. They had the treasure, but they had lost their friend. "We cannot leave him," Sarah said. She was looking at the shore with tears in her eyes. "We will not leave him," Marcus promised. "But we must move the ship now. Vane's ship will be here soon. We need a plan." The ship was safe for the moment, but the victory felt small. They were back on board, but the crew was not whole. Marcus looked at the black line of the island. He knew he had to go back. The deck of the Silver Moon was very quiet. Usually, the ship was a place of noise and movement, but tonight the air was heavy with sadness. Marcus stood near the wooden railing. He looked at the dark shape of the island. He could see a small orange light on the beach. It was a campfire. He knew that Barnaby was there, and he knew his friend was in trouble. Elena walked up to Marcus. She did not have her compass or her map. Her hands were empty and she looked very tired. "Captain," she said softly, "the crew is talking. They are worried about Barnaby. He is a strong man, but Vane's pirates are many." "I know, Elena," Marcus replied. He looked down at the wooden box he had taken from the secret chamber. He had not opened it yet. To him, the box felt like a heavy weight. "Barnaby stayed behind so we could escape. He gave us his freedom. I cannot sail away and leave him in a dark cage." Sarah joined them. She was holding a long rope and a small knife. "We are ready to go back," she said. Her voice was firm. "We do not care about the silver statues or the gold. We want our friend back." Marcus felt a sense of pride. His crew was not just a group of sailors. They were a family. He looked at the people standing on the deck. They were all looking at him, waiting for his command. He knew that going back to the island was very dangerous. Captain Vane was surely angry, and his guards would be watching every inch of the sand. "Listen to me," Marcus said to the gathered crew. "We are going back, but we cannot take the whole ship. The Silver Moon must stay hidden here in the shadows of the rocks. If Vane sees this ship, he will use his cannons to sink us." He pointed to the small boat. "I will take 3 people. We will move like ghosts in the night. We will not use torches, and we will not use our swords unless we must. We will find where they are keeping Barnaby and we will bring him home." Julian stepped forward. "I can help," he said. "I know the secret paths of this island. There are old tunnels near the beach that my people used for storage. Vane does not know about them. We can use those tunnels to get close to their camp without being seen." Marcus nodded. "Good. Julian, you will lead us. Sarah and Elena, you will come with me. Thomas, you are in charge of the ship. If we do not return by the time the sun is high, you must take the ship and leave. Do not let Vane capture the Silver Moon." Thomas looked sad, but he nodded. "I understand. Captain, we will wait for you." The 4 explorers checked their gear. They wore dark clothes to hide in the shadows. Marcus put the wooden box in a safe place inside his cabin. He did not want to lose it, but Barnaby was more important than any treasure. They lowered the small boat back into the water. The sound of the waves against the hull was a steady, low rhythm. They began to row toward the shore, moving away from the safety of the ship and back into the heart of the enemy's camp. The small boat touched the shore. Marcus and his team stepped onto the wet sand, moving quickly to hide the boat under a cluster of low-hanging palm leaves. The air was filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasted meat. Not far away, the pirate camp was alive with noise. Captain Vane's men were celebrating their victory, unaware that the most important treasure was still missing. "The entrance is this way," Julian whispered, pointing toward a jagged rock formation that stood like a silent guard at the edge of the jungle. They crept through the tall grass, their hearts racing. Julian led them to a narrow opening hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. It looked like a mere crack in the stone, but as they pushed through, it widened into a cool, dry tunnel. The walls were made of the same white stone as the secret chamber, but these were rough and unfinished. These tunnels were used to move supplies away from the eyes of invaders. Julian explained. They run directly under the beach and come up near the center of the island. The group moved in single file. Marcus held a small, shielded candle that cast just enough light to see their footing. The ground was uneven, and the air was thick with the scent of old earth. Above them, they could hear the faint, muffled sounds of the pirates walking on the sand, a reminder of how close the danger really was. After several minutes of walking, Julian stopped. He pointed to a wooden ladder that led up to a trapdoor made of heavy timber. This should come out behind the storage tents. He said, "If the pirates are using the camp, I think they are. Barnaby will be held near the center, close to the fire." Marcus climbed the ladder first. He pushed the trapdoor up just an inch. Through the gap, he saw the flickering orange light of the campfire. He saw tents made of dark canvas and several pirates sitting on crates, drinking from metal cups. In the center of the camp, tied to a thick wooden post, was Barnaby. The big man looked tired, and his shirt was torn, but he was alive. He sat with his back against the post, his eyes closed. A single pirate stood guard nearby, leaning on a long spear and looking bored. "I see him," Marcus whispered down to the others. "He's right in the middle of the camp. We need a distraction. We can't just walk in there and cut him loose." Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a bright, silvery powder. "This is something I found in the storage room of the ship," she said. "If it hits the fire, it will create a massive cloud of white smoke and a loud bang. It won't hurt anyone, but it will scare them." "Perfect," Marcus said. "Sarah, you are the fastest. Can you get close enough to throw it?" Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I'll be back before they even know what happened." Sarah moved out of the trapdoor like a ghost. She was so quiet that even the dry grass did not rustle under her feet. Marcus, Elena, and Julian watched from the darkness of the tunnel, their breath held tight. The pirate camp was filled with the smell of roasting meat and the sound of rough laughter. Captain Vane's men thought they had already won. Sarah reached the edge of the large campfire. The flames were high and orange, casting long, dancing shadows against the tents. The guard near Barnaby was looking away, trying to light a small pipe. This was the moment. Sarah took a deep breath, aimed, and threw the small glass bottle directly into the center of the fire. A massive flash of brilliant, white light erupted from the flames. It wasn't a fire explosion, but a sudden, blinding cloud of silver smoke that smelled like ozone. A loud, ringing sound echoed through the camp, like a giant bell being struck. "My eyes! I can't see!" One pirate screamed. What was that? An attack. Another yelled in confusion. The camp turned into total chaos. Pirates were running in every direction, tripping over crates and bumping into each other in the thick, silver fog. Marcus didn't waste a second. He leaped out of the trapdoor, followed by Elena. Marcus reached Barnaby in 3 long strides. The big man was blinking, his eyes wide with surprise. "Captain," he grunted, his voice dry. "Don't talk, just move." Marcus whispered. He pulled out his sharpest knife and sliced through the thick hemp ropes holding Barnaby to the post. The ropes fell away, and Barnaby rubbed his sore wrists. He looked tired, but the strength was already returning to his face. "Get to the tunnel. Now," Marcus ordered. They turned to run, but the silver smoke was starting to thin. Through the haze, a tall figure appeared. It was the pirate with the red scarf. He had covered his eyes with one hand, but in the other, he held a heavy pistol. He pointed it toward the center of the camp. "They are taking the prisoner." The pirate roared. "Stop them!" A bullet whizzed past Marcus's ear, hitting the wooden post. "Down!" Barnaby shouted. He grabbed a heavy wooden crate nearby and threw it with incredible force at the red-scarfed pirate. The crate hit the man in the chest, knocking him backward into a tent. The team scrambled toward the trapdoor hidden behind the storage tents. Julian was already waiting, holding the door open. One by one, they dropped back into the cool, dark safety of the underground passage. Marcus was the last one in. As he pulled the heavy timber door shut, he heard the angry boots of dozens of pirates hitting the sand right above his head. "Is everyone okay?" Marcus panted, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm fine," Sarah said, appearing from the shadows of the tunnel. She had circled back around after throwing the bottle. "I'm more than fine," Barnaby said, giving Marcus a heavy pat on the shoulder that nearly knocked the wind out of him. "I thought I was going to be shark bait by morning." "We aren't safe yet," Julian warned, pointing down the long, dark hallway of the tunnel. "Vane will realize where we went. We need to get back to the ship before they find the other end of this path." The tunnels were narrower now, and the air was damp. Julian led the way, his hand trailing along the cold stone wall. Behind him, Barnaby moved with a slight limp, but his face was set in a mask of determination. They could still hear the muffled shouts of pirates above them, but the sounds were growing distant. "The exit is just ahead," Julian whispered. "It opens into a sea cave near where we hid the boat. We must be fast. If Vane is smart, he will send his ship to patrol the coast." They reached a point where the stone floor became wet with salty water. The tunnel ended at a jagged opening that looked out over the dark ocean. The moon was beginning to set, casting long, pale fingers of light across the waves. Just as Julian had predicted, the small boat was still there, tucked safely between the boulders. "Look!" Elena pointed toward the horizon. The Vulture was moving. Its black sails were visible against the starlit sky. The pirate ship was no longer sitting idle near the golden beach. It was gliding slowly across the mouth of the bay, its lanterns swinging like angry eyes. Captain Vane was searching for them. "They're blocking the way out," Marcus said, his voice grim. "If we don't reach the Silver Moon and move her now, we'll be trapped in the cove forever." They pushed the small boat into the water. Barnaby took the oars again. Despite his exhaustion, he pulled with a rhythm that was steady and powerful. Marcus sat at the back, clutching the wooden box. He felt the eyes of the Vulture on them, even though they were still hidden in the shadows of the cliffs. The row back was the longest 10 minutes of Marcus's life. Every splash of the oars felt like a thunderclap. Every ripple in the water felt like a signal to the enemy. As they turned the corner into the hidden cove, the familiar shape of the Silver Moon appeared. "Captain, you're back," Thomas called out from the deck, his voice a harsh whisper. They scrambled up the rope ladder. The moment Marcus's boots hit the deck, he turned to his crew. "No time for stories. Raise the anchor. We need every inch of sail. We have to run the gap before the Vulture closes it." The ship came to life. The crew worked with a desperate energy. The anchor rose, and the white sails unfurled, catching the light breeze. Marcus took the wheel, his hands gripping the wood so hard his knuckles turned white. "Wait," Julian said, stepping up to the wheel. He looked at the wooden box in Marcus's hand. "Before we face Vane, you must see what is inside. The silver statues were the history, but this is the power." Marcus looked at the box. He took a deep breath and flipped the latch. The lid opened. Inside, resting on a bed of blue velvet, was a large, crystalline lens shaped like a crescent moon. It wasn't made of glass. It was made of a clear, glowing stone that seemed to trap the moonlight inside it. "The moon lens," Julian whispered. "It was designed to guide ships through the most dangerous fog and darkness. If we use it now, we can see the path that Vane cannot." Marcus picked up the lens. It felt warm in his hand. He looked through it toward the dark, jagged rocks at the exit of the cove. Through the lens, the darkness disappeared. The hidden rocks beneath the water glowed with a soft blue light, showing a clear, safe path that no map could ever record. Marcus held the moon lens to his right eye and looked out over the dark, churning water. The world transformed. The deep blacks and greys of the night faded, replaced by a glowing landscape of neon blues and soft whites. Beneath the surface, the jagged rocks that threatened to tear the ship apart shone like bright beacons. He could see a narrow, winding trail of clear water, a path that looked impossible to the naked eye. "It's a ghost path," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with awe. "The rocks aren't where they seem. Follow my lead." "Captain, you're heading straight for the reef," Thomas shouted, his face pale with fear. "Trust the lens." Marcus yelled back. He spun the wheel hard to the left. The silver moon tilted sharply, her wooden hull groaning as she dove toward a cluster of shadows that looked like certain death. Behind them, the Vulture saw the move. Captain Vane's ship roared, its massive black sails catching a sudden gust of wind. The pirate ship began to turn, its cannons positioned to fire. Vane thought Marcus had made a mistake, that the silver moon was about to wreck itself on the stones. "They're closing in," Sarah cried, pointing to the orange flashes of the Vulture's lanterns. "Hold steady," Marcus commanded. Through the lens, he saw a gap between two underwater spires. It was no wider than the ship itself. He steered into it. To the crew, it looked like they were sailing into a solid wall of stone. They grabbed the railings, closing their eyes and waiting for the sound of breaking wood. Instead, there was only the smooth hiss of water. The ship glided through the gap with inches to spare. The glowing path led them behind a tall sea stack, hiding them from the Vulture's line of sight. Suddenly, a loud, bone-jarring echoed across the water. It didn't come from their ship. Marcus looked back. The Vulture, trying to follow them into the shallow area, had hit a hidden sandbar. The massive black ship jerked to a stop, its masts shaking. Even from a distance, they could hear the angry screams of Captain Vane and the sound of his ship's heavy wood splintering against the earth. "They're stuck." Barnaby let out a triumphant roar, punching the air with his good hand. "The big bird has clipped its wings." The Vulture was trapped, tilted at a dangerous angle. Its cannons pointed uselessly toward the sky. They were no longer a threat. Marcus took the lens away from his eye. The world returned to darkness, but the path ahead was now clear. They reached the mouth of the bay and felt the long, steady roll of the deep ocean waves. They were out. They were free. "Julian, this lens, it's a miracle," Marcus said, handing the crystalline crescent back to the historian. "It is a guide," Julian corrected, smiling. "But it takes a captain with a steady hand to follow it." As the island of the silver moon began to shrink behind them, Marcus looked at the wooden box. They had the lens, they had their lives, and they had the truth of the island. But as he looked at the horizon, he knew their story wasn't over. They had a treasure that the whole world would eventually come looking for. The sun began to rise, not as a harsh glare, but as a warm, golden glow that kissed the tops of the waves. The island of the silver moon was now just a dark speck on the horizon, slowly disappearing into the morning mist. On the deck of the silver moon, the air was filled with a sense of quiet triumph. The smell of gunpowder and salt had been replaced by the scent of fresh coffee and the cool morning breeze. Barnaby sat on a crate, his leg wrapped in a clean bandage. He was eating a thick slice of Thomas's fresh bread, looking much better than he had a few hours ago. Sarah was busy coiling ropes, her movements efficient and rhythmic. Elena stood by the railing, her map spread out one last time, though she wasn't looking at the lines. She was looking at the sea. Marcus joined Julian at the back of the ship. The wooden box sat on the small table between them. The moon lens sat inside, resting peacefully, its inner light dimmed now that the sun was up. "What will you do with it, Captain?" Julian asked. A lens like this could make you the richest man in the world. Every merchant and king would pay a fortune to never lose a ship to the dark again. Marcus looked at the lens, then out at his crew. He thought about the Iron Gate, the silver statues, and the narrow escape through the ghost path. He thought about Roger, whose greed had nearly cost them everything. The world isn't ready for this. Marcus said quietly, "If I sell it, it becomes a tool for war or greed. It was built to guide those who seek the light, not those who want to own the ocean." Julian smiled, a look of deep relief crossing his face. "My ancestors would agree with you. They didn't build the chamber to be a bank. They built it to be a sanctuary. We'll take you to the southern ports." Julian. Marcus continued, "You can continue your studies there. As for the lens, it stays on this ship. It belongs to the Silver Moon. We'll use it to find the places that others are too afraid to go. We'll be the guardians of the secrets Vane couldn't understand." Barnaby walked over, limping slightly but grinning wide. "Does that mean we're looking for more trouble, Captain?" Marcus laughed, a sound that carried across the water. "Not trouble, Barnaby. Adventure. There are plenty of maps in the world that still have blank spaces." As the ship sailed further into the open blue, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. He had started this journey as a man looking for a way to pay his debts and find a bit of glory. He was ending it as a leader of a crew that had become a family. They had survived the storm, the jungle, and the pirates. He took the wheel, feeling the familiar vibration of the hull as it cut through the water. He didn't need a lens to see the path ahead of him now. The horizon was wide, the wind was steady, and the future was theirs to write. The Silver Moon sailed on, a white speck against the vast, golden morning, heading toward a new dawn. The Silver Moon arrived at the port of Valerus under a sky the color of a bruised plum. Valerus was known as the City of Sails, a massive, chaotic sprawl of wooden docks, stone warehouses, and towering lighthouses. It was a place where gold moved faster than the tide and secrets were the primary currency. For Marcus and his crew, it was a necessary stop. The ship needed fresh timber for her railings, and the crew needed a moment of peace. As the anchor splashed into the harbor's murky water, Marcus felt a strange heaviness. They were no longer just a ship of explorers. They were the keepers of the moon lens. He watched as Julian packed his small bag. The historian looked older than he had when they first met, but his eyes were bright with a newfound sense of peace. "This is where I leave you, Marcus," Julian said, standing on the deck. "Valerus has a great library. I will spend my days translating the scrolls I found in the chamber. The world needs to know the history of my people, even if they never see the silver statues." "You're sure you'll be safe?" Marcus asked, looking at the busy docks. "Vane's men have friends everywhere." Julian smiled, touching the leather pouch at his belt. "I am a ghost in this city, Captain. People look at me and see a tired old man, not a guardian of legends. But you are different. The Silver Moon is a beautiful ship, and beauty attracts eyes. Be careful who you trust in the taverns." Barnaby helped Julian down the gangplank. The big man was still limping, but he gave the historian a gentle pat on the back. "If anyone bothers you, Julian, just send a bird. We'll come back and knock their house down." Marcus watched Julian disappear into the crowd of merchants and sailors. It felt like the end of a chapter, but the weight of the moon lens in his cabin reminded him that the story was far from over. He turned to Elena and Sarah. "We stay for 2 days." Marcus ordered, "Get the repairs done. Buy fresh fruit, clean water, and extra gunpowder. And listen to the whispers. I want to know if anyone is talking about a black ship stuck on a sandbar." As evening fell, the city lit up with thousands of lanterns. From the deck, Marcus watched the flickering lights. Valerus was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. The open ocean was where they belonged, but the ocean was also where their enemies waited. Somewhere in the shadows of the docks, a man in a dark cloak watched the silver moon, writing notes in a small book. The hunt for the lens had already moved from the sea to the streets. The second day in Valerus was hotter than the first. The air was thick with the smell of drying fish and expensive spices. Barnaby and Thomas were busy overseeing the replacement of the damaged railing, while Sarah was high in the rigging, checking for frayed ropes. Marcus was in the captain's cabin, staring at the moon lens. Even in the daylight, it seemed to pulse with a faint, internal rhythm. A knock at the door broke his concentration. It was Elena. Her expression was guarded. "Captain, there is a man on the pier asking for you. He doesn't look like a sailor. He looks like money." Marcus followed her to the deck. Standing on the docks was a tall, thin man dressed in fine purple silks. He carried a cane topped with a silver bird's head, and two large guards stood behind him like stone walls. "Captain Marcus." The man called out, his voice smooth and cold. "My name is Master Elian. I am a collector of rare antiquities. I heard a fascinating story last night about a ship that navigated the Ghost Path." Marcus felt a chill. The Ghost Path was a name Julian had used, a name that shouldn't be known in Valerus. He walked to the edge of the ship, looking down at the merchant. "Stories in Valerus are like the fog, Master Elian. They look solid until you try to touch them. We are just a merchant ship seeking repairs." Elian smiled, but his eyes remained sharp. "A merchant ship with no cargo? How curious. I have a proposal. I am looking for a specific crystalline object. Some call it a moon lens. I am willing to pay enough gold to buy 10 ships like yours. You could retire to a villa in the hills and never see a drop of salt water again." The crew had stopped working. Barnaby held his hammer tightly, watching the merchant's guards. Marcus felt the weight of the moment. He could end the danger right now. He could take the gold and walk away. But he looked at Sarah, who loved the wind, and Elena, who lived for the maps. They weren't just sailors. They were explorers. "The lens isn't for sale," Marcus said firmly. "And even if it was, I wouldn't sell it to someone who sends spies to watch my ship at night." Elian's smile didn't fade, but it became thinner. "A pity. Gold is a soft way to settle a debt. Iron is much harder. You may find that Valerus is a very difficult harbor to leave without my permission." The merchant turned and walked away, his guards following him. Marcus watched them go, knowing he had just made a powerful enemy. The peace of the port was gone. "Prepare the ship," Marcus whispered to Elena. "We aren't staying for a second night. We leave at midnight." The sun was setting, and the crew of the Silver Moon worked with a quiet, desperate speed. They didn't use lanterns, moving by the fading orange light of the sky. Marcus was checking the crates of supplies when a young boy, no older than 10, ran onto the deck. He was out of breath and held a wax-sealed cylinder in his hand. "For the captain." The boy panted. "The old man at the library said it's urgent." Marcus took the tube and gave the boy a small silver coin. He went to his cabin and broke the seal. Inside was a letter from Julian, written in a hurried hand. "Marcus, my friend, I have found something in the great library that changes everything. The moon lens is not just a guide for the sea. It is part of a set. The ancients built 3. The moon lens for the tides, the sun lens for the desert, and the star lens for the heavens. Master Elian is not just a collector. He is a member of the Order of the Unseen. They have the sun lens, and they will stop at nothing to unite the 3. If they have all 3, they can find the sunken citadel, the place where the lenses were forged. Legend says the citadel contains the Forge of Light, a power that can control the weather itself. You must not stay in Valerus. Elian has the harbor guards in his pocket. Go to the Isle of Whispers. There is a woman there named Kaya. She knows the stars better than anyone. She can help you find the star lens before Elian does. Godspeed. Marcus. Marcus felt a cold sweat on his neck. The stakes had just grown from a simple treasure hunt to a race for a power that could change the world. He realized that Captain Vane was a simple thief compared to Master Elian. Vane wanted gold. Elian wanted the world. He stepped back onto the deck. Change of plans. Marcus announced. We aren't just running. We have a destination. We're heading for the Isle of Whispers. Captain, that's in the Forbidden Reach. Elena said, her eyes wide. No one goes there. The currents are unpredictable, and the reefs are like razors. We have the moon lens. Marcus reminded her. The currents are just water, and the reefs are just rocks. We can see what others cannot. We leave now. As the ropes were untied, a bell began to ring in the city. It was the harbor master's bell, signaling a lockdown. 2 large guard boats were moving toward the mouth of the harbor. Marcus grabbed the wheel. The silver moon began to drift, her sails catching the first breath of the night wind. They had to get out now, or they would be trapped in Valerus forever. The silver moon cut through the harbor water like a knife. The guard boats were closing in, their lanterns bobbing on the waves. Marcus steered the ship toward the narrowest part of the harbor exit, a place where the current was strongest. Oars! Marcus shouted. We need more speed. Barnaby and the crew hit the lower decks, pulling the heavy wooden oars through the water in perfect rhythm. The ship surged forward, passing the guard boats just as they began to turn. A few arrows whistled through the air, but the darkness protected the crew. Within minutes, they were past the lighthouses and into the open sea. Once they were safely away from the city lights, the crew collapsed on the deck, exhausted. Marcus handed the wheel to Thomas and went to the storage room to check the supplies they had rushed on board. He moved a stack of empty grain sacks, and his hand hit something soft. Show yourself, Marcus said, drawing his short sword. A figure crawled out from behind a crate. It was a girl, perhaps 17 years old, with dark, tangled hair and eyes that looked like they had seen too much. She wore a thief's leather vest and had a small dagger strapped to her leg. Don't kill me, she said, her voice raspy. I'm not with Elian. I'm actually the one who stole that letter from the library for Julian. Marcus lowered his sword but didn't sheath it. You're a thief. I'm an apprentice, she corrected, standing up. My name is Kale. Elian killed my master because he wouldn't tell him where the sunken citadel was. Julian told me you were the only chance to stop the order. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Marcus looked at her. She was small and looked hungry, but there was a fire in her eyes that reminded him of Sarah. He knew he should probably take her back to the next port, but they didn't have time for day tours. Can you sail? Marcus asked. Kale shook her head. No, but I can pick any lock in the world, and I can climb walls that would make a monkey jealous. Marcus sighed. Their crew was growing in strange ways. Fine. You stay. But if you touch anything that doesn't belong to you on this ship, Barnaby will throw you to the sharks. Understood. Kale nodded quickly. Understood, Captain. Marcus went back to the deck, looking at the stars. The Isle of Whispers was weeks away. They had a new crew member, a new mission, and a powerful enemy behind them. The Silver Moon was no longer just a ship. It was a rebel vessel on a journey to save the horizon. The journey toward the Forbidden Reach began with a week of eerie calm. The ocean was like glass, and the heat was oppressive. Kale proved her worth quickly, not by picking locks, but by helping Sarah in the rigging. She was fearless, swinging from the masts with a grace that even the veteran sailors admired. However, Marcus was worried. The moon lens had started to glow with a deep, pulsing blue light, even during the day. Julian's letter had mentioned the lenses were connected. It's reacting to something, Elena said, standing in the cabin with Marcus. Look at the needle on the compass. It's pointing toward the Isle of Whispers, but it's vibrating. The star lens. Marcus whispered. It must be calling to this one. Or something else is. On the 8th day, the sky changed. It didn't turn grey or black. It turned a strange, sickly yellow. The wind died completely, leaving the sails hanging like dead skin. The silence was absolute. Not even the seabirds followed the ship anymore. Captain, look at the horizon, Barnaby said, pointing south. A massive wall of clouds was rising. It wasn't a normal storm. The clouds were swirling in a perfect circle, and flashes of purple lightning danced within the vortex. It looked like the ocean was being pulled upward into the sky. The maelstrom of the Reach. Elena whispered, her face pale. The legends say it's a gate, but no ship that enters ever comes back. Marcus grabbed the moon lens. Through the crystal, the yellow sky turned a deep indigo. He could see the wind, not as a feeling, but as glowing currents of energy. He saw that the storm wasn't a natural event. It was a barrier. Tear down the sails. Marcus shouted. Secure everything. We're going into the center. The center. Sarah yelled. Captain, that's suicide. The lens shows the path. Marcus replied, his voice rising above the first low rumble of thunder. The storm is a circle. If we stay on the outside, it will crush us. If we get to the center, the water is calm. It's the only way to the isle. The first gust of wind hit the silver moon like a physical blow. The ship groaned, tilting dangerously. Rain began to fall, but it was warm and smelled like metal. Marcus tied himself to the wheel with a thick rope. He held the lens to his eye with one hand and steered with the other. Hold on. He roared as a massive wave rose before them, a mountain of water lit by purple fire. The silver moon plunged into the heart of the vortex, disappearing into the yellow mist. The second part of their great adventure had truly begun. The world was no longer made of wood and water. It was made of noise and purple fire. The silver moon was trapped in the throat of the maelstrom. Waves as tall as the masts crashed against the hull, sending torrents of warm, metallic-smelling water across the deck. Marcus gripped the wheel, his muscles screaming under the strain. He kept the moon lens pressed to his eye. Through the crystal, the chaotic spray of the storm vanished, replaced by glowing ribbons of current that threaded between the crushing walls of water. To the right. Hard to starboard. Marcus roared, though his voice was barely a whisper against the thunder. Barnaby and Thomas threw their weight against the secondary steering bars below deck. The ship groaned, a deep, structural sound that made Marcus's heart sink. They were pushed to the absolute limit. Sarah and Cale were huddled near the main mast, their fingers white as they gripped the safety lines. Suddenly, a massive wave, a mountain of dark indigo, rose directly ahead. We're going through it, Marcus yelled. He saw the glowing ribbon of the ghost path dive straight into the base of the wave. The silver moon plunged. For a long, terrifying moment, everything was dark and silent. The pressure of the water against the hull was a physical weight. Then, with a sound like a giant sigh, the ship burst through the other side. The change was instantaneous. The screaming wind died to a gentle breeze. The towering waves flattened into a surface as smooth as polished obsidian. Above, the sky wasn't yellow or purple. It was a deep, velvet black, filled with stars that seemed twice as large and 10 times as bright as any Marcus had ever seen. They were in the eye of the vortex. Is everyone alive? Marcus gasped, untying the rope from his waist. One by one, the crew stood up, dripping and dazed. Elena looked around, her mouth open in wonder. The stars, they aren't moving. We're in a place outside of the normal tides. In the center of this impossible calm sat an island. It was not green like Turtle Island or golden like the beach. It was a jagged spire of white rock that seemed to glow with a soft, internal light. No trees grew there, but the air was filled with a low, humming sound, 1,000 voices speaking at once in a language no one could understand. The Isle of Whispers. Julian's letter had called it. We made it. Kale whispered, her eyes fixed on the white spire. But look at the water behind us. Marcus turned. The wall of the maelstrom was still there, a spinning fortress of storm clouds that surrounded the island in every direction. They were safe for now, but they were also trapped in the heart of the world's most dangerous cage. The silver moon drifted toward the shore of the island. There was no sand here, only smooth, white pebbles that clinked together like coins as the waves pushed them. The humming sound grew louder as they approached, a vibration that Marcus could feel in his teeth. It wasn't just noise, it was information, a data stream of history and memory echoing off the stone. Drop the anchor, Marcus said, his voice hushed. Even a loud word felt like a transgression in this place. Marcus, Elena, Sarah, and Cale took the small boat to the shore. Barnaby stayed behind to guard the ship, his hand resting on his sword. As they stepped onto the white pebbles, the humming changed. It became a series of distinct whispers, fluttering past their ears like invisible birds. Did you hear that? Sarah asked, looking over her shoulder. It sounded like someone saying my name. It's the stone, Elena said, kneeling to pick up a pebble. It's resonant. It traps the sound of the wind and the sea. It's an ancient recording. They walked toward the center of the island, where the white spire rose into the starlit sky. At the base of the spire was a cave entrance, carved into the shape of a blooming flower. Standing there was a woman. She wore robes of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread that mapped the constellations. Her hair was stark white, and her eyes were the color of the morning mist. You are late, Captain Marcus, the woman said. Her voice didn't whisper, it rang clear and cold. You must be Kaya, Marcus said, stepping forward. I am the Weaver of Whispers. She replied, I have watched your ship since you left Valerus. You carry the moon lens, but you do not yet understand the burden of the light. You have brought the darkness with you. Elian? Marcus asked. Kaya pointed toward the sky. Far above the spinning wall of the maelstrom, a dark shape was visible. It wasn't a ship on the water. It was an airship, a massive, black-hulled vessel held aloft by glowing gas bags. It hovered just outside the vortex, waiting. The order of the unseen does not need to navigate the waves. Kaya said, they have the sun lens, and with it, they have mastered the winds. They cannot enter the eye yet, but they are patient. They are waiting for you to find the star lens for them. We won't let them have it, Cale said, her hand going to her dagger. Kaya looked at the young thief, a small smile touching her lips. The star lens is not a thing to be taken, child. It is a thing to be earned. The spire is a trial. Only those who can hear the truth within the whispers can reach the top. Kaya led them into the base of the white spire. The interior was a hollow cylinder, with a spiral staircase carved into the walls that stretched upward into the darkness. There were no torches, yet the air was filled with a soft, ethereal light. The humming here was deafening, a roar of 1,000 voices all shouting different things. The star lens sits at the summit, Kaya explained. As you climb, the whispers will become your own thoughts. They will tell you that you are a failure. They will tell you that your crew will betray you. They will show you the things you fear most. If you believe them, the stone will become soft, and you will fall. I've dealt with pirates and storms. Marcus said. I can handle a few voices. Pirates are easy to fight. Captain. Kaya said. It is the pirate in your own heart that is the danger. They began the climb. At first, it was simple. The stairs were wide and solid. But as they reached the first 100 feet, the whispers shifted. You're just a thief, Kale. A voice hissed in the girl's ear. You'll steal the lens and leave them all to die, just like you left your master. Kale stumbled, her foot sinking into the stone as if it were mud. Marcus caught her arm. Don't listen. It's the island. Then the voices turned on Marcus. You aren't a captain. Marcus. You're a man who ran away from his debts. You're leading these people to their graves for a piece of glass. Look at Barnaby. He's crippled because of you. Marcus felt the weight of the words. His legs felt heavy, like lead. The stone beneath his boots began to sag. He looked at Elena, who was staring into the darkness, her face pale. She was hearing voices of her own, voices of doubt about her maps and her knowledge. Everyone. Link arms. Marcus shouted, his voice straining against the humming. Focus on the person next to you. We aren't the voices. We are the crew of the Silver Moon. They grabbed each other, forming a human chain. Marcus focused on the warmth of Kale's hand and the steady breath of Elena. He blocked out the whispers by reciting the names of his crew, over and over. Barnaby, Sarah, Thomas, Elena, Kale. Slowly, the stone hardened. The whispers began to fade, replaced by a single, harmonious note. The stairs became solid again. They climbed higher and higher, the air growing thin and cold. They reached a platform at the very top of the spire, open to the stars. In the center of the platform, floating in a beam of starlight, was the star lens. It was a jagged, diamond-like crystal that sparkled with every color of the spectrum. The moment Marcus reached for the star lens, the humming stopped. The silence was so sudden it felt like a physical blow. He touched the cold, sharp surface of the crystal, and a surge of energy raced up his arm. Suddenly, the moon lens in his pocket flared with light. The two crystals were singing to each other. We have it, Marcus said, his breath visible in the cold air. And now they come, Kaya said, looking up. The black airship above the vortex had moved. Using the power of the sun lens, it had created a tunnel of calm air through the spinning clouds. The massive vessel was descending toward the island, its black silk gas bags blotting out the stars. Master Elian. Elena whispered. A hatch opened on the bottom of the airship, and dozens of figures began to descend on silken ropes. These weren't common pirates. They wore polished black armor and carried crossbows that hummed with strange energy. At the front was Elian, his purple silks fluttering in the high wind. Captain Marcus. Elian's voice was amplified by a metal horn. You have done the work of a hero. You have retrieved the star lens from the spire. Now, hand it over, and I shall allow your crew to live as my servants. I'd rather walk the plank into the maelstrom. Sarah yelled, drawing her blade. A predictable response. Elian sighed. Fire! The black-clad soldiers leveled their crossbows. Bolts of blue light hissed through the air, striking the white stone of the spire. Marcus and the team dove for cover behind the central pedestal. Kaya, can you stop them? Marcus asked. My power is for the island, not for war. The Weaver replied. But the star lens is the key to the heavens. Use it. Marcus. Combine the two. Marcus pulled the moon lens from his pocket. He held the two crystals together. The blue light of the moon and the prismatic sparkle of the star began to swirl. He felt a connection to the sky above. He didn't see the airship. He saw the gravity and the wind as physical lines he could pull. "Kale! Sarah! Get ready!" Marcus shouted. "We're going to give them a reason to fear the sea." Marcus raised the combined lenses toward the black airship. He didn't fire a bolt of light. Instead, he pulled on the lines of the vortex itself. The wall of the maelstrom, which had been circling the island, suddenly lurched inward. A massive arm of storm clouds reached out like a claw, grabbing the tail of the airship. The airship lurched violently as the vortex clawed at its hull. Elian screamed orders, his face twisted in a mask of rage. The sun lens on the deck of his ship flared a bright, angry orange, trying to push the storm back, but the combination of the moon and star was stronger. Marcus was steering the weather itself. "Go! To the boat!" Marcus commanded. They raced down the spiral stairs, the spire shaking under the force of the storm. The airship was being pulled down toward the jagged white rocks. Soldiers were falling from the ropes, disappearing into the white pebbles. They reached the beach just as the silver moon was being tossed by the rising waves. Barnaby was at the railing, shouting for them to hurry. They scrambled into the small boat and rowed with everything they had. "Kaya! Come with us!" Marcus called back to the shore. The Weaver of Whispers stood on the pebbles, her white hair flying. "No, Captain. My life is bound to the stone. Go. The path is open for only a moment." As they reached the deck of the Silver Moon, Marcus ran to the wheel. He held the two lenses together, looking through them at the wall of the maelstrom. He saw the ghost path again, but this time it was wider, glowing with the light of the stars. "Full sail!" Marcus roared. "Every inch of cloth. We're riding the storm out." The ship surged forward. Behind them, the black airship was being torn apart by the vortex. Elian's screams were lost in the roar of the wind. The silver moon hit the wall of clouds, but instead of being crushed, the ship seemed to skip across the surface of the waves, propelled by the energy of the combined lenses. They burst out of the forbidden reach into the open sea. The yellow sky was gone, replaced by a clear, starry night. The maelstrom was a distant, dark memory on the horizon. Marcus leaned against the wheel, his heart slowing down. He opened his hand. The moon lens and the star lens lay there, two pieces of a puzzle that was becoming more dangerous with every step. "Two down," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "One to go." "The sun lens," Marcus said. "It's still with Elian's ship. Even if it crashed, the Order will go for it, and we need it to find the Citadel. Then we go back to the desert," Kale said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Back to where the sun never sets." Marcus looked at his crew. They were battered, bruised, and tired. But they were the only ones who could stop the Order. "Set a course for the burning sands," he ordered. "The final hunt begins." The silver moon dropped anchor in the harbor of Xeroxis, a city that looked like it had been carved directly out of the sun-bleached cliffs. There were no green trees here, only the white-hot glare of stone and the endless, rolling dunes of the desert beyond. The air was so dry it felt like breathing sand. Marcus stood on the deck, his eyes shielded by a piece of tinted glass. The moon lens and the star lens were locked in a reinforced chest in his cabin, but he could feel them. They were restless. The star lens, in particular, seemed to vibrate whenever it was pointed toward the deep desert. "This is as far as the ship goes, Captain," Barnaby said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The water is too shallow, and the heat is warping the deck boards. If we stay here too long, the silver moon will crack like an eggshell." "I know," Marcus replied. "Elena, what do the charts say?" Elena stepped forward, holding a scroll that looked brittle in the heat. The maps of the burning sands are old and unreliable. The dunes shift every time the wind blows. But Julian's notes mentioned a place called the Sunken Pillar. It's supposed to be the marker for the temple that holds the sun lens. We can't walk, Sarah noted, gesturing to the vast expanse of sand. We'd be dead of thirst in a day. We won't be walking, Marcus said, pointing toward the docks. A group of strange vessels was tied up at the stone piers. They weren't boats. They were long, flat sleds with massive, colorful sails and giant, iron-rimmed wheels. They were sand skiffs, built to surf the dunes as if they were waves. Kale. Marcus turned to the young thief. You grew up in the desert regions. Do you know anyone who can sail those things? Kale squinted at the docks. A small, clever smile played on her lips. I know one man. But he's a rogue, even by my standards. If we want his help, we're going to need more than just gold. We're going to need a story he can't resist. The tavern in Xeroxis was called the Rusty Anchor, though there wasn't a piece of iron in the building that hadn't been pitted by sand. In the corner, sitting under a slow-moving fan, was a man with skin like old leather and eyes the color of amber. His name was Suli, and he was known as the fastest sand sailor in the burning sands. A ship's captain in my bar. Suli laughed, his voice sounding like two stones rubbing together. You look like you've had too much salt water, Marcus. The desert doesn't have tides. It only has hunger. I'm not here for a swim, Suli, Marcus said, sitting down. I'm looking for the Sunken Pillar. The laughter stopped instantly. The other patrons in the tavern went quiet. Suli leaned forward, his amber eyes narrowing. That's a death sentence. The pillar is in the heart of the Wailing Dunes. The Order of the Unseen has scouts all over that territory. Why would I risk my skiff for a fool's errand? Marcus didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glowing shard of the star lens that had broken off during the escape. He placed it on the table. The crystal pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, casting prismatic shadows on Suli's face. Suli gasped. He reached out to touch it, then pulled his hand back. Starglass. I haven't seen a piece that large in 20 years. You really have the lenses, don't you? I have too, Marcus whispered. And the Order has the third. If they find the pillar first, they won't just own the desert. They'll own the sun itself. I need your skiff, Suli. And I need your eyes. Suli looked at the crystal, then at Marcus's crew. He saw the determination in Sarah's eyes and the quiet strength in Barnaby. He stood up, knocking his chair back. My skiff is called the Dune Dancer, Suli said. She's the fastest thing on 3 wheels. We leave at sunset. The sand is too hot to sail during the day. If you aren't ready when the sun touches the horizon, I leave without you. The Dune Dancer was a marvel of engineering. Its sails were made of a light, tough silk that caught even the smallest breeze, and its wheels were taller than a man. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the skiff took off, its blades cutting through the sand with a sound like 1,000 whispers. Why do they call them the Wailing Dunes? Sarah asked, clutching the railing as the skiff bounced over a massive ridge. Listen, Suli said, pointing a finger to his ear. As the wind picked up, the shape of the dunes caused the air to vibrate. It sounded like a long, mournful cry, 1,000 voices mourning a lost world. It was eerie, and it made the hair on Marcus's neck stand up. It's more than just wind. Julian's voice echoed in Marcus's mind. Marcus pulled out the star lens. Through the crystal, the desert was no longer a wasteland. He could see the lines of heat that still lingered in the sand from the day's sun. He realized the desert was a giant battery, storing energy. The order is here. Kale shouted, pointing behind them. 3 smaller, faster skiffs appeared from the shadows of a large dune. They were painted black and bore the silver eye of the order. They were armed with sun throwers, mirrors that could focus the moonlight into a burning beam. Sully, can you outrun them? Marcus yelled. Not in these dunes. Sully replied, fighting the rudder. They're lighter than us. We need to fight. Sarah, take the star lens. Marcus handed her the crystal. Focus the light of the stars through it. Use it like a shield. Sarah held the lens aloft. As the Order's skiffs fired their burning beams, the star lens caught the light and scattered it, turning the deadly heat into a harmless shower of colors. But the enemy was closing in, and their spears were tipped with something that glowed a sickly green. The battle in the sand was a blur of speed and dust. One of the Order's skiffs pulled alongside the dune dancer. A pirate leaped across the gap, his sword drawn. Barnaby met him mid-air, his massive fist sending the intruder flying back into the sand. They're trying to board us. Elena cried, pointing to the second skiff. Suddenly, a massive shape appeared in the air above them. It was a familiar black airship, its hull patched with silver plates. It was the Vulture, or what was left of it. Captain Vane, or rather, Master Elian, who had clearly taken control, was looking down from the observation deck. You are persistent, Captain Marcus. Elian's voice boomed from above. But the desert is my domain now. I have the sun lens, and it is hungry. A beam of pure, white-hot light erupted from the bottom of the airship. It hit the sand in front of the dune dancer, turning the silica into instant glass. Sully screamed as the skiff skidded on the smooth surface, losing its grip. He's using the sun lens to trap us. Marcus realized. He pulled the moon lens from his belt. He knew he couldn't fight the sun with the moon, but he remembered what Kaya had said. The lenses work together. Sarah, the star lens. Touch it to the moon lens. Marcus shouted. As the 2 crystals touched, a pulse of cold, blue-white energy rippled outward. It didn't fight the heat. It neutralized it. The glass beneath the skiff shattered back into sand, allowing Sully to regain control. We can't win this fight in the open. Sully yelled. There! The sunken pillar. We have to go underground. Ahead of them, a massive stone finger poked out of the sand, tilted at an angle. It was the pillar. At its base, a dark hole led down into the earth. Sully steered the dune dancer straight at the pillar. It was a reckless move, a jump off a high dune that sent the skiff flying through the air. They landed with a bone-jarring crash right at the entrance of the hole. Everyone out. Now! Marcus commanded. They scrambled into the dark opening just as a second beam from the airship scorched the earth where they had been standing. The heat was so intense that the stone at the entrance began to melt. They were inside a massive, underground chamber. The walls were made of black obsidian, polished so brightly that they acted like mirrors. Even with only a single candle, the room was filled with light. This is it. Elena whispered, her voice echoing. The solar temple. At the far end of the room, sitting on a pedestal of gold, was the sun lens. It was a perfect, golden sphere that seemed to contain a miniature sun. It didn't glow. It burned with a steady, quiet power. But they weren't alone. Standing between them and the lens was Roger, the traitor. He wasn't smiling anymore. His skin was pale, and his eyes were glowing with a strange, golden fire. He held a staff tipped with a piece of the Order's tech. You shouldn't have come here, Marcus, Roger said, his voice sounding like multiple people speaking at once. The sun lens doesn't want to be found. It wants to be fed. Where is Elian? Marcus asked, his hand on his sword. He is above, waiting for the signal. Roger replied. "But I think I'll take the lenses for myself. Why be a servant when you can be a god?" Roger raised his staff, and the obsidian walls began to glow. The temperature in the room started to rise. The final battle for the 3 lenses had begun, and the air was already starting to burn. The obsidian walls of the solar temple didn't just reflect light, they amplified it. Roger stood at the center of the chamber, his body silhouetted against the blinding gold of the sun lens. The air was shimmering with heat, turning the room into an oven. Marcus could feel the moisture being sucked from his skin, his breath coming in shallow, hot gasps. "You were always too small for this, Marcus." Roger's voice echoed, distorted by the temple's acoustics. He raised his staff, and a beam of concentrated solar energy lashed out, striking the floor inches from Marcus's feet. The stone didn't just crack, it turned to molten slag. "Barnaby, right. Sarah, left," Marcus commanded, his voice raspy. Barnaby didn't hesitate. He charged across the polished floor, ignoring the searing heat. He used a heavy metal shield he had scavenged from the Dune Dancer to deflect the smaller bursts of energy. Meanwhile, Kale moved with her usual silent grace, staying in the long shadows cast by the pillars. She was looking for the mechanism, the weak point in the temple's power. "You can't fight the sun, Marcus," Roger screamed, his eyes now entirely gold. He tapped into the sun lens, and the room flared. It was a whiteout, a total loss of vision. In that moment of blindness, Marcus didn't rely on his eyes. He pulled the moon lens from his belt. He didn't look through it. He projected it. He held the moon lens in front of the blinding solar glare. A miraculous thing happened. The lens acted like an eclipse. A cool, dark shadow stretched out from Marcus, cutting through the heat. It provided a path of cold for the crew to move through. Sarah used the shadow to get within striking distance. She didn't use her sword. Instead, she threw a flash powder bomb Kale had prepared. The explosion wasn't big, but it disrupted the light flow for a split second. "Now!" Marcus roared. Barnaby tackled Roger with the force of a falling mast. The staff flew from Roger's hand, clattering across the obsidian. As the connection to the temple was severed, the golden fire in Roger's eyes flickered and died. He collapsed, gasping for air as the room began to cool. Marcus didn't wait. He ran to the pedestal. The sun lens was humming, a deep, resonant vibration that shook his very bones. He reached out and grabbed the golden sphere. It was hot, searingly hot, but as it touched the moon and star lenses already in his satchel, the temperature stabilized. The 3 lights were finally in one hand. "We have to go," Kale yelled, pointing up. "The ceiling is melting." The airship above was firing its main cannons, trying to collapse the temple on top of them. The desert was claiming its own. The escape from the solar temple was a blur of falling stone and rising dust. Sully was waiting at the entrance with the Dune Dancer, the skiff's sails already full of the evening's hot wind. They piled onto the deck just as the sunken pillar vanished beneath the shifting sands for another 1,000 years. "Back to the ship. Go!" Marcus yelled over the roar of the desert wind. They reached the silver moon as the first stars of the night appeared. The crew was exhausted, but there was no time for rest. Master Elian's airship was still visible on the horizon, a dark predator circling the coast. Marcus retreated to his cabin with Elena, Kale, and Julian, who had left a message that he was monitoring the tides from a distance via a messenger bird. Marcus placed the 3 lenses on his navigation table. The moon lens, blue, the star lens, prismatic, and the sun lens, gold. Separately, they were powerful tools. Together, they were a map. The legends say the lenses must be aligned with the 3 peaks of the horizon. Elena whispered, her fingers tracing an old chart. Marcus picked up the lenses. He didn't lay them flat. He stacked them. He placed the moon on the bottom, the star in the middle, and the sun on top. He held them up to the light of the rising moon through his cabin window. A beam of light passed through the three crystals. It didn't just hit the wall. It projected a three-dimensional image into the center of the room. It was a holographic map of the ocean, showing hidden trenches and underwater mountains that no sailor had ever seen. There! Cale pointed to a spot in the deep ocean, far to the west of the Forbidden Reach. The Eye of the Abyss. In the center of the light map, a massive structure began to glow. It was a city of spires and domes, built into the side of an underwater volcano. It was the sunken citadel, the birthplace of the lenses and the home of the Forge of Light. It's deep, Marcus noted. Thousands of feet down. Even with the best hull, the silver moon would be crushed by the pressure. The lenses don't just show the way, Marcus. Julian's notes in the satchel read. They provide the protection. They are the keys to the pressure itself. Marcus looked at his ship. He loved the wood and the sails, but he knew they were about to ask her to do something impossible. They weren't just going to sail the sea, they were going to dive into it. The transformation of the silver moon was a sight of pure magic. Using the instructions revealed by the light map, the crew reinforced the hull with star steel they had found in the temple. Marcus placed the three lenses into a special housing at the front of the ship, the oculus. As they reached the coordinates of the Eye of the Abyss, the ocean began to churn. A massive whirlpool opened. But it wasn't a destructive vortex. It was a gateway. Seal the hatches, Marcus commanded. Barnaby, check the air vents. Sarah, tie yourself to the mast. The ship entered the whirlpool. As the water closed over the deck, a shimmering bubble of blue and gold light erupted from the oculus. The combined power of the lenses created a pressure shield, a sphere of energy that pushed the ocean back, leaving the ship sitting in a pocket of air deep beneath the waves. The descent was breathtaking. Through the shimmering shield, the crew saw creatures that defied description. Giant, glowing jellyfish the size of houses, and whales with skin like polished silver. The deeper they went, the darker the ocean became, until the only light was the glow of the oculus. It's beautiful, Cale whispered, her face pressed against the glass-reinforced porthole. It's like the sky, but upside down. Look ahead, Elena said, her voice trembling. The sunken citadel appeared out of the darkness. It was a city of bioluminescent stone, pulsing with a soft green and violet light. It wasn't a ruin. It was alive. Thermal vents from the volcano powered the city, creating a warm, vibrant oasis in the freezing dark. But they weren't the only ones there. Master Elian's airship had undergone its own transformation. It had become a black, iron-hulled submarine, looking like a monstrous shark. It was already docked at the main gate of the citadel. Elian had used his own ancient tech to follow the trail of the lenses. He's at the forge, Marcus said, his eyes narrowing. He's trying to activate the final sequence. If he succeeds, he won't just control the weather. He'll be able to boil the oceans or freeze the continents. Not on my watch, Barnaby growled, checking his gear. We've come too far to let a man in purple silk ruin the view. The interior of the sunken citadel was a labyrinth of coral-encrusted halls and water-filled chambers. Marcus and his crew moved through the dry corridors, their boots echoing on the ancient stone. They reached the Forge of Light, a massive, spherical chamber at the very heart of the city. In the center of the room sat a machine of impossible complexity. It looked like a giant clock made of liquid light. Master Elian stood at the control console, his hands glowing with a stolen energy. He had the master key, a fourth, smaller lens that he had hidden all along. "Welcome, Captain," Elian shouted, his voice booming through the chamber. "You are just in time to witness the rebirth of the world." With the forge, I will erase the storms, the deserts, and the borders. I will create a world of perfect order, under my rule. Order isn't something you impose. Elian. Marcus shouted back, drawing his sword. It's something that grows from freedom. The final battle was a clash of philosophy and steel. Elian used the forge to create solid light warriors, ghostly figures that fought with the speed of thought. Barnaby and Sarah held them off, their blades clashing against the energy constructs. Kale used her climbing skills to reach the upper rafters, looking for a way to disable the power core. Marcus engaged Elian directly. The merchant was no longer a weak man. He was empowered by the forge. Every strike of his cane sent a shockwave of heat through the air. You can't win, Marcus. Elian sneered. I have the power of a star. Maybe. Marcus panted, his shield smoking. But I have a crew. Kale dropped from the ceiling, landing directly on the console. She didn't break the machine. She redirected it. She took the 3 lenses Marcus had tossed her and slotted them into the safety ports Julian had described in his research. The forge didn't explode. It balanced. The wild, angry energy Elian had been drawing was suddenly calmed by the moon and star lenses. The solid light warriors vanished. Elian screamed as the power was pulled back into the machine. Without the stolen energy, he was just a man who had gambled everything and lost. The forge settled into a low, steady hum. The city glowed with a new, healthy light. The balance of the world had been restored. The silver moon rose from the depths of the ocean, breaking the surface just as the sun began to rise. The water fell from her hull in sparkling sheets. The air was fresh, and the horizon was clear. They had left Elian and his men in the custody of the Citadel's automated guardians. They would be well fed, but they would never see the sun again. The forge was stable, and the lenses were back where they belonged, serving as the heartbeat of the sunken city. Marcus stood at the wheel, looking out at the vast, open sea. The crew was gathered on the deck. They were tired, and their ship was scarred, but they were the heroes of a story the world would never fully know. What now, Captain? Sarah asked, leaning against the mast. The treasure is gone, the bad guy is caught, and we're out of gunpowder. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple compass. It wasn't magical. It didn't glow. It was just a tool for a sailor. We still have the ship, Marcus said, a small smile playing on his lips. And we still have the sea. There are thousands of islands we haven't seen yet. There are maps to be made and stories to be lived. And Roger? Elena asked. Marcus looked toward the brig. Roger had been silent since the temple. We'll leave him at the next port with enough gold to start a new life. He's not a villain. Elena. He was just a man who forgot that the journey is more important than the destination. Kale looked up from where she was sharpening her dagger. I think I'd like to stay. If that's okay. You're part of the crew, Kale. Barnaby said, patting her on the head. Someone has to keep us from getting locked out of our own cabins. As the silver moon sailed toward the golden horizon, Marcus felt the weight of the adventure settle into a warm memory. They weren't looking for silver moons or golden suns anymore. They were looking for the next dawn. The sails caught the wind, the wood hummed its familiar song, and the silver moon headed out into the great unknown, her path guided by the stars and the steady hand of her captain.